Hello, everyone. It is December 6th, and it's the right date, yeah, December 6th. I'm Barb Nosworth, the mayor. We'll call this meeting to order, and we'll start by going around introducing yourself, starting on my left.
I'm Jessica Buell, City Councilor.
Melissa Youssef, Mayor Pro Tem.
Courtney Osborne, City Councilor.
Kim Baxter, City Councilor, and we list.
Jose Madrigal, City Manager.
Thank you. Thank you. And I will start, as I do with study sessions and with city council meetings, by a personal land acknowledgement, which represents my view and not necessarily the view of council, and not the view of council as a whole. So for thousands of years, this region was home to numerous people, bands, tribes, and nations. Each had their distinct culture, artistic expression, and community mores. In particular, this region was the ancestral home of the Nuchu, Dene, Pueblo, Hopi, multiple Apache bands, and various other tribes and Latinx people who used and stewarded this land. I recognize that indigenous peoples were forcibly removed from their ancestral lands by the US government. It is important to recognize that the narrative of this region has mostly been told from the dominant perspective, without recognition of those who came before us and who to this day continue to thrive, create, and connect with this land. Thank you for your respect in my acknowledging this legacy. Thank you. So let's get started. I want to just go over the agenda today and then also the future agenda for January. So today we've got new business and any informational items that are needed. We have the comprehensive parking master plan, and we've allocated 1 hour. And I know you were a bit shortchanged and rushed last time, so I want to stick to that. Then we'll be looking at the pickleball courts. I'm seeing Turi there. Okay, about 30 minutes. And capital improvement projects, about 30. If we stay on time, we can take a break. If not, we have the 10-minute leeway there. And then on on January, where's the January schedule? On January 3rd, I wanted to make certain we are aware of what we'll be talking about. We will do Mesa Park, Durango Trails, and the water rate study. And that's very important because that will determine whether we change the rates up, down, keep them the same for the water. So that's it. And that really they need council feedback on that. So those are the items for the first meeting in January. All right, let's open it up. Any new business? No business, new business? I have one. I sent you all from the, what are they called? The Southwest Rural Philanthropy Days. We'll be hosting their annual meeting in Durango, and they put in a request for $5,000. I know we wouldn't decide it now, but if the council were interested in supporting it, we would probably need to make a decision at the first January meeting.
Is that one of those things that should go through United Way or one of the other programs that we do for distributing money?
You know, I thought about it, but I wasn't certain the timing would be what they needed. And it seems like it's not so much local, but of a larger, so I saw it as a little different.
I was just wondering.
Yeah.
Just a question.
Others might have a different opinion.
It's a conference, I think is what they're looking to put through. And so it's being hosted in Durango.
Yep.
So they've asked for the city of Durango to be a sponsor for it. I did reach out and just ask who else is a sponsor. They did not have a response yet to that question because they had just sent out, I guess, a group of emails on the sponsorship. So they will be reporting back to us as they get a response back. So maybe by January, we have a different understanding of who all has become sponsors on it. Might be a better way of going. I do see it a little bit different than United Way because it's not so much as like a service or a good. It's more of just they're having a conference here in the city, and do we want to be an active participant as a sponsorship? And so,
Do we sponsor other conferences?
not that I know of, but I don't know if we've actually been asked to.
The Alliance, we've done
Oh yeah, that's
the
right.
Alliance.
Yeah, we do the Alliance.
How do they request funding?
They send us a flyer the same kind of way with an email that asks if we'd like to continue our sponsorship, which we've done every year, and then it settles a certain level that gives us
Yeah.
tickets to go.
What is the purpose of the conference?
Rural Philanthropy Days, I know they've had one before, I think in Mancus. The Community Foundation will be involved. It's anybody who's involved in philanthropy. And I think they also bring donors to the meeting as well. So there's,
On that list, there was a lot of nonprofits.
Yeah.
that were part of it. Connection, Big Fellowship Sisters, I saw a bunch of.
I just don't have a good enough feel for what value they bring, what happens when, comes out of those conferences or benefit. There wasn't enough information.
so how about if I reach out to Krista, who wrote, and ask for some more information, maybe? And then if you're amenable, we could have it at least discussed very briefly at the first January meeting so they can get a decision.
Yeah.
Does that work?
Sure.
Great.
I have one item. And that is how to deal with the Community Relations Commission since 4 people out of 5 resigned from that commission. Any thoughts or future new business to discuss that?
We are having a discussion February 6th that staff was going to bring back boards and commissions, which that would be part of it with the kind of community concept that we've been talking about. So that's coming on February 6th. I don't know if that helps your request or if you're looking for something different.
Well, what does this council think? Do we need to initiate something to get that commission
I would,
back alive? And
I would say let's wait for a recommendation of staff as to like what we're gonna do going forward. I think it would be a lot of work to re-interview and get another community relations commission if we're just in a month going to, we've talked, there's been different options with the CRC, whether it's a regional wide one or if it stays here or if it's an in-house, hiring, like I feel like there's lots of different options on the table. And I think to go through interviews again, and then just change it would be defeats the purpose. So I would say let's wait for staff recommendations and how council wants to go forward with boards and commissions and then go from there.
the meeting for February, what was it, 6th? So 2 months from now, is that the whole boards and commissions or is it specific to CRC?
The whole boards and commissions, CRC just being a component.
And then the appointments typically take place, I think, in April or May, the interviews, is that right?
April, after the election.
We can do this at any point in time, though, if we saw a need for it, because we do that all the time. If we
Yeah.
don't get enough, we re-advertise.
So we're basically speaking of a delay of 5 months. Of not having that underrepresented, group represented to council through commission. If
Well, what the staff has already suggested, we've already gone through that from this summer. They suggested that we look at a larger community-wide that might involve 9R, it might involve the county, it might involve the hospital, it might involve. And I know that those conversations have been happening. We've been updated on that. So we've got a recommendation from the staff of what to do with that already. That,
What was the recommendation?
The
Well,
staff
we'll see
talked
also.
about, so shifting it to a community-wide community relations commission. And the direction from council was to begin having those conversations with entities to determine if there was a agreement or a viability of other entities wanting to do so. So far, 9R has expressed interest, the county has expressed interest.
I like that concept. So
And we do have a member still on the CRC. Have you reached out to Olivia and has anyone reached out to Olivia?
I have,
Okay, great,
Mayor.
perfect. Just want to make sure.
as mayor.
Just to make sure that she's still on board, because that would be a great representation of
Mhm.
the city of Drake.
No, I reached out to her and left a message.
Great.
Okay, that means, I think it's missing. So you're not supportive of the discussion, you're not supportive. of the discussion.
And I'd like to put it a little more positively. I think that I think it would be disingenuous to bring people on, knowing that we're going to go to a bigger effort that could start sooner than April. So I'm wanting to see the staff recommendation. We've got a date for that. And we still have Olivia able to be available. And so I don't think it's a level of not being supportive, but following the staff recommendation.
And contrary to what you just said, I absolutely support the conversation. But when it's scheduled and with the feedback from staff and with knowing how much further along we are on the community-wide DEI conversation.
So if that takes place in February, and it's about reorganizing the way we approach DEI and the CRC Commission, it will be longer even probably than 3 months, but I accept.
I'm not so concerned about that because we have an ongoing DEI agenda within the city right now. That's made huge progress. As a matter of fact, there's a couple of classes here. In the next-
And today there was one.
Yeah. Yes, hard to do them all, but, and so and there's more classes in February, and I think that, staff has been moving along well in that avenue, and I'm not concerned about us dropping the ball or not achieving goals.
And even I think to build upon that conversation, I think it's even within each department, correct?
Yeah, continuously having a focus on it. It's something that, you can never be perfect at, but you continue to strive and do things. And I found the growth management learning series, or not growth, that's a different one that we're doing, our DEI series
Yeah.
this week, pretty informative. I was on it. I know you were on the same one
Yeah, I'm on it with you.
on Monday. That was really good. And I think that we're really providing a lot of great feedback and having a lot of participation within our organization, attending these sessions and being able to ask questions.
Right.
I'll make a plug for it. I'm signed up for Wednesday night. There's an evening one if you can't do it during the day, so that's Wednesday night. And I think there's another one later in the week as well. Yeah, there's one on Great Fest. Okay. Anything else? All right. So then what we'll do is we will go into the comprehensive parking master plan.
Mayor and council, we have Scott Shine and Wade Moore to help us with the parking master plan discussion. Just as a reminder, Sarah is still on maternity leave, so we wish her the best and know she's enjoying it and getting time to spend with her new daughter.
Nice.
So we're really excited for her, but we'll have Scott and Wade introduce this item, and I do believe we have the consultants as well. to
So right behind
Come
you.
on up and join in.
Okay. Sorry, I don't want to block you off, Scott.
So as you're getting situated, welcome and thank you for coming back and the work that you've added to this. It's very helpful and I particularly appreciate you having it in advance. So we all have had time to have read it. So I thank you for that.
And
I'm assuming all councils had time to have read it better.
first, thank you. Oh, sorry. Thank you so much for having us back for this opportunity to go over the plan with you again. Great to see everyone. I wanted to take a moment to introduce our director from Walker Consultants. This is Andrew Vidor. He is our director of studies. He has been overseeing this effort with myself and the rest of the team.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, and it's been a lot of fun to step in and learn a lot more about behind the scenes of our parking system. Wade and his team do a great job, often thankless job, but have done a particularly good job collecting data over a number of years. And Walker has come in and they have experience all over the country, and they've looked at this data and have come up with some pretty specific and clear recommendations to say, you've got a good overall parking management structure, you've got a good supply of parking. There are some quick wins, as they've referred to them, that you can do to better utilize the parking you've got in a cost-effective way before we start to look at much larger and costlier undertakings like garages or other programs. So that's been their findings. And they, like I said, they've had a lot of good data to use to get there, which has been encouraging to take. Parking is strangely like it's very emotional and
Yeah.
there's a lot of psychology to parking, things like that. And they've done a good job just taking the numbers and looking at the situation on the ground. And so we appreciate their work. I've enjoyed learning more about it, and they're going to do the bulk of the presentation, and then here. I told them study sessions are more conversational, so I think there's a few things, recommendations that you'll be more interested in, so feel free to stop us and we'll respond to those questions as we get there. So I'll let Chrissy go. Get started.
Thank you. And I'll try to go a little slower this time than we did last session. So just wanted to briefly touch on how we got to where we are today before we start jumping into what the recommendations are, and then providing enough time, of course, at the end or throughout to address any questions or comments that you might have regarding the plan. Again, as Scott mentioned, we had a lot of great quantitative data to look at throughout this process, but we also had a lot of really great participation from the Durango community itself. We had over 1,700 touch points during each of the, or excuse me, cumulative throughout each of the 3 phases
You
of
put
this effort.
1,700,
1,700.
great.
I believe it was 1,734, somewhere in that range
Okay.
in total. Now, we talk about the importance of managing parking, and this really does have an emotional impact to it because it does affect us on a day-to-day basis, both in our personal lives as well as the economic vitality of the Durango community. As I'm sure you've heard from all of the residents and businesses, especially in the Main Avenue area. But we've really formulated this plan around the city's holistic vision, of course, coming from the 2017 comp plan and through all of the other planning efforts that have come before this, the sustainability plan, the affordable housing plan. There's the parks, recreational and open space plan. I believe we looked at over 13 different planning efforts and neighborhood planning, and really use those as our guiding principles, if you will, as we looked at parking for the overall city. And while there is a lot of focus on downtown, because that is where we have a lot of the quick wins available, you'll see, especially within the short term and the longer term, some of our strategies are focused on some of the outer areas of Durango. As we look at these strategies, based on our last conversation when we were here, it was clear that there was a lot of familiarity with the strategies that we were proposing. So we've focused on how are we going to implement them and what are the impacts. So within our quick wins, one of our prioritized, if you will, strategies is increasing communications, both how we communicate with the public and how often we communicate with the public. One strong recommendation that we have is an annual report, but even on a day-to-day basis, addressing those perceptions of a lack of parking supply, specifically in the downtown area. How do we get the customers, the employees, business owners, and the residents to understand where those available spaces are? Because for a lot of people, their perception is the reality. So we need to address those. The city has great communications already, so it's leveraging what is already happening. A great example of this was the transportation division just last week had the trolley parked out at what was it? I'm sorry. Yes, Noel Night. Thank you. So just more of those opportunities to get out, interact with the community. Wade and his team puts together a report every month of what the occupancy is downtown. So publishing that to the city website and then using the Facebook, social media posts, YouTube channels that the community is very active on already to communicate that out to them so that they can see that information and it's a bit more transparent.
That communication, but what's on there? Is it like available parking?
What we do every month,
Yeah,
it'll show you what we've done. It's usually a couple months behind because it's a huge spreadsheet.
Right, I
that
was
has to be
thinking
put into GIS, which shows a map of this area.
yeah.
And what the percentage occupancy and therefore vacancy is for every street.
That'd be-
block.
That would be really, okay.
That's impressive.
Yeah, for some reason I haven't seen that. I sure would love to see that going forward. That sounds like a very good piece of communication to get out.
Absolutely. So the building blocks are already there. It's just getting that information out to the community in an effective manner. We've also touched on signage and wayfinding. During our last session together, we had the example of the parking signage at Transit Center. parking permit only. So just updating that language and the way information is presented on that signage so that it's clear where the public parking is located. And then getting that, of course, onto the website, perhaps into a mobile app so that visitors know where that is.
Do we have signs downtown too to the transit center
Yes.
and parking?
They're not consistent though either. That's part of.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I'm once again noticed them myself. And so, I mean, because, you know, obviously the transit center, I mean, we've seen the studies that it's what, 60% vacant most of the time or something like that. And so, if we need to be directing people better to that somehow, even myself, as I drive downtown, I'm not going there, and that should be automatic for me, for sure, and it's not. And so I think that, I don't know, I feel like we need to do a better job with that somehow.
I think the signs, they're small. And I think when we have the bump outs, they can be blocked or not as visible, but they're not a big sign. And I know they're closer to the transit center. And as you enter town from like 13th Street or something like that, I think there might be one sign that says parking straight ahead, but it's not like really driving you to the transit from that length of town. So I walk the streets on the Main Avenue often, and you don't see those signs.
And just while we're thinking about it, and this is somewhat of a deep, I don't want to take us off track from your thing, but while I'm thinking about it, with the transit center, it's affordable parking, it's inexpensive parking, and so somehow maybe we should be trying to get that word out better too. Even, you know, on the signs, and or can we offer free parking at times, like at this transit center, to get people aware during special events and stuff like that. So just bank that for later.
I think that's in your
Yes.
presentation about
Oh, good.
demand pricing and all
Yeah,
that. Yes.
Yeah, because
Thank you.
that would be
As
good.
a follow-up on, because we're gonna move on from the parking supply and demand. As you go into the next steps or recommendations, is there more talk? I just wanted to clarify a couple of things. Get it clarified. I reviewed was the 2000 parking analysis report that showed for the whole city a very clear demand, supply, and so on. And it's not really clear in this report, but there is an appendix, and I think that came from you, appendix C, that shows for every block. Is that where you want the percentages?
I generated the numbers, and these guys put that on theirs.
Now, one quick question is, I don't see Third Avenue, for example. And it was that.
This particular report is driven by the years.
Oh,
The other one that's more in a map form is done by color, it goes all the way to college. All the way.
so where I'm going with this is, if you see the demand and supply based on your numbers, so that's what you. On that table, it shows that we have May, June, July, August, September, October exceeding demand versus suggested supply, and I think that was between 85 and 90.
Yes.
So, when we speak of supply and demand, the whole block on from 500 Main to 1100 Main, and then a little bit narrower on Second Avenue is at capacity.
The on-street is, so the appendix C is specific to on-street parking. It does not include any off-street parking. And that is for that specific block face. So overall, the entire public system averages just under 75% occupied during peak conditions, but that's not for the overall day. It's for approximately 2 hours each day.
And to clarify, is that citywide or is that for that?
That's for downtown
No.
public managed parking.
Because when we speak of supply and demand, if we currently are at on-street parking at capacity, and there's a graph in your report that shows in 10 years, we're exceeding 100% demand for what we have as supply. So I want to ask you, how can we say there is enough supply with these numbers, even though there's other areas further away, park space, but for this specific area, how do we come to that conclusion if I see this going?
So the graph that you're speaking to is for the on-street supply for downtown. And we need to look at downtown as a holistic system, not just the on-street. So we need to include the off-street into that as well.
So clarify from this off-street farm, is that private, public?
That is the public service lots.
The city-owned public service lots
And I think
on
there's-
Second and
There's always going to be 100% utilization of parking during some times of the day on some blocks. There's no way that, say, for example, between 7th and 9th, that you're not going to have some of that area 100% occupied on Main Street during certain hours. So people would have to park on the side streets or park 2 streets over or park in a surface parking lot. But you're always going to have some areas that are 100% occupied. That's the way it is.
Point of clarification, this table shows not that people manage an hour, it says, that, for example, June average occupancy, which is already, 96%, so it's not.
Sure, between those blocks during the summertime, there's probably not going to be a parking spot for 2 blocks on Main Street.
but there
on both
could
sides of
be,
the road,
Right.
but they could be in the parking lot or at the transit
Or the
center.
trans-
Yeah, there could be 3 streets, the third block could have an empty spot, or the side streets could have an empty spot. There's no way with the number, even if there weren't any tourists, we couldn't guarantee a parking spot in front of the building that you want to park in. That's not how parking works.
I'm going to encourage us to keep moving on just because, you made your explanation. You're looking at a very specific one table specific to one measurement. You're trying to take a more holistic view that looks at all available parking. Thank you.
They will come back to supply. It's
Yes.
woven through.
Yeah.
Is there data available that shows on the other parking spaces, public parking, how much occupancy you have, same as you have here? I mean, it could have been a line item saying the transit center.
It won't be exactly the same because this is derived from numbers that were actually removed from years. But we have eyeball counts of those places. So when in July, you're seeing 100% from College to 10th on Main, we can show you that there were 70 spaces available, a block and a half away over the transit center.
I think that would be very helpful to explain to people. If people need to be aware of that, those numbers.
Absolutely.
You go later, you'll explain about better science and so on. But for us and looking at this, that would be beneficial to say the nearest one is transit center, and that's 50% availability, because then you can tie it together.
Absolutely, and I think that speaks very strongly to that increasing communication and the transparency of the overall parking system itself that we were speaking to. If I could very quickly, you mentioned the projections in the future where the system could be over 100% capacity in 10-year timeframe. That particular instance that you're speaking to is in the aggressive scenario. And I do want to note that based on trends since the 2017 comp plan, Durango is actually trending below the conservative scenario that we're seeing there. So as things stand today, we are below the conservative scenario, but we did not want to adjust those down because we don't want to under plan, if you will, because we don't want you to be without
Well,
needed parking
instead of
supply.
10 years, maybe it's 11 years, 12 years.
Yes,
It's not that far off.
right.
But I think I want to thank you for that because I think it's really important that we have accurate information and it not be misrepresented, pulling out some data points to, make it sound worse. It's very helpful to know that we are actually below your projections. Okay, continue, please.
Thank you. So moving into the special events and parks access, as we mentioned last time, this could take the form of a park to park shuttle where we're connecting existing parking facilities to those trailheads where there's unmet need at this time. As well as mobile payment integration, which was a very popular request that we heard from day one with this effort. Very low cost option relative to some of the others that will bring down the cost of some of the short-term recommendations as well as the long-term recommendations if that is rolled out and implemented ahead of time. And then code updates. This is a very important one moving forward, both in terms of moving forward on the shared mobility recommendations as well as land use codes. There's a big push for affordable housing throughout Colorado, but also within Durango here. So making the code a little bit more simple for developers to bring those options forward and pass those cost savings on to those residents.
Yeah, just this is a good example of kind of a synergy between community development and transportation. Right now, we're getting a lot of requests to convert downtown space from office or even retail to residential, because office is not in very high demand. The way the code's written now is if you change uses downtown, you need to provide parking for that new use, new residential use. So that stifles a lot of that, which is kind of counterproductive to our other goals and council's goals. So we've asked them to explore the idea of a downtown residential permit program that could take advantage overnight of transit lot spaces or other public lot spaces, on street spaces potentially, but we talked at lunch, it's pretty complex, especially when you start to think about snow removal, maintenance and things. There's shuffling, which side of the street can you park on when, but I wanted you guys to know that that's kind of a high priority for us to dig into that immediately after this plan is finalized, to look at code updates, and we can.
And when you said we're going to shut down, is that?
The consultants.
You guys,
So
okay.
it's about helping us take it from a high level conceptual recommendation to actually.
Great.
code language.
Chrissy, please continue.
Thank you. I think that's a great segue into our short-term recommendations and the neighborhood parking permits, specifically because there is one neighborhood along Third Avenue, specifically the historic residential neighborhood that is immediately adjacent to downtown that has an issue with parking supply and availability today. Within the plan, we do have some recommendations on how that policy might work, specific to having areas that are predetermined to be eligible to apply for that. This neighborhood in particular could be a quick win. We have observed the need for a residential parking permit there if they would benefit from it. Our recommendation is in that neighborhood specifically to move straight forward into verification of majority resident approval for that. And moving forward then, the short-term recommendation would be to continue to collect parking data for the other areas of the city to see what other neighborhoods might qualify for neighborhood parking permit programs.
Question on that.
Yeah.
You made many good recommendations in the report. I think that one specifically stands out to me. But there's more to it, and because let me just see, I made some notes. It would solve the problem for the residents, but you also have events, and they tend to go to Main Street. You have churches, so there is going to be a parking requirement, and that has to be as churches. I'm not sure, but I don't know until that one gets pretty busy to sign points. Well, maybe the question would be, how do we make sure that churches or any events are not impacted? And then another angle we can take, let's for example say there's parking structures on those. That would reduce the impact that we currently see on Third Avenue, and that makes the parking permit area redundant, maybe, because then
Potentially reduce pressure. The reason they're going to Third Avenue now is because it's free. Parking garage would still cost money, so it would still drive people to find the free solution. So just having more supply would not release the pressure.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can also make free parking.
Yeah.
On the weekends in the church goes and park for free. I'm just trying to see if we look at this from a holistic perspective, and if you do one, and there's consequences for the others. I believe the project on that. So.
And-
To what degree do you think that plays a role?
A massive, very important role. So no neighborhood parking permit program, even within Durango, from one neighborhood to the next will look the same. One area might have permitted parking along with time limits. Another might have permanent parking along with paid parking, or it could be permitted just for those residents. And that's something that would need to be explored by city staff along with those residents as that specific zone was being developed and outlaid. Of course, even from that, you'll have ramifications of the cost of the permit zone, because any residential neighborhood should not have that cost passed on to other residents of Durango who don't live in that area, ideally. So opening that up to time limited parking, to paid parking could reduce the cost of those permits for residents within that area. And that's something that each zone will have to weigh and decide on their own.
Well, I hope you include churches as well as the way, because I think that is a significant.
Do you?
Again, it would be up to that specific neighborhood.
Okay.
So for Third Avenue, there's how many churches? It's quite a few.
Plus the people who work like in the Smiley building, would they be eligible for this parking on the street? Paid
I
parking,
hate to keep, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but
But-
again, that would be up to.
right?
Within the report, we do recommend that after a area is designated as eligible,
Mhm.
that the city staff have a neighborhood meeting with property owners, residents within that area, and let them know what all of the options are for the permit program in their area, and then coming to that conclusions for themselves.
Because each neighborhood's gonna be different and have different characteristics, some have churches, some
Right,
businesses we've been, you're gonna wanna develop each of those neighborhood parking permit programs to fit that unique character of the
Okay.
neighborhood. It's not intended to be a one size fits all approach for every residential area within the city.
So it's really a collaborative approach with staff and the residents of that neighborhood,
Absolutely.
residents and businesses and.
and businesses,
churches,
yeah, because you've got,
nonprofits.
A great example of that is, I know Durango is not Boulder. Boulder has a very old neighborhood parking permit program that has been in place for well over 30 years. They have some zones that do allow for commuter permits, and they charge those at a premium, where a resident permit in that area, I believe, was $17. They are increasing that at this point, whereas a commuter permit was over $100. So it really offset and subsidized the cost for the residents, and that was something that the residents in those areas was open to, reducing their own supply to offset the cost of their permits, whereas other zones within the city do not allow commuter permits to be sold, and they have
Interesting.
that.
Sounds like quite the process. How long do these permit processes usually take to get in place?
To initially set it up, you're looking at about a year to get it off the ground. That's why it is in the short term,
Mhm.
to get that data collection in place. But once it is established, it is a very quick administrative process that is just ongoing for staff.
Great.
can you go through the other short-term recommendations, please?
Absolutely. So we have the enhanced demand-based parking pricing, and we call that enhanced because there is, of course, demand-based pricing in downtown Durango now. We're recommending adding at least another tier to that so that we can continue to encourage demand into those underutilized areas and give some incentive to those who are willing to pay a little less to walk an extra block or two. And then with the flexible parking passes, this is just providing flexibility and more options to more individuals. So a current monthly parking pass really incentivizes individuals to optimize that value and to drive and park every day of that month. Whereas a flexible parking pass might encourage them to use transit 1 or 2 days a week.
Clarify real quick, Wade, correct me, to change parking rates now, is it an act of council through resolution?
The last time it was done, it was just the council. That was quite a while ago.
Need to change parking rates.
Yeah, that, which is what that's talking about, is having them float a little bit more, so we would need to have administrative ability to do that, so I just want to clarify, I couldn't
Yeah,
remember.
if we buy into this plan, the idea is that you're giving us a toolbox that says, okay, we're at more than 80% occupied in an area for a period of time, we raise the rate by 20%. We don't come back first, we show the data, and then we do it, and then we manage it. When it comes back down, then we can look at lowering the price, but it tends to smooth things around a little bit each time we make a price change.
That was
We've
the
got
intent.
50 cent per hour rates west of narrow gauge. Cheapest places in town you can park on the street, They're empty all the time. That comes back to communication. We have free parking after 5 o'clock every night and all weekends. Transit lot's still empty on Sunday. There's no church people there now unless there's a distance event to park by the church.
Yeah, we want it. I mean, that's part of the service we provide to our community, for church goers. You don't want, especially more senior people, you don't want them to walk 5 blocks. I mean, it's not just take the residents of that specific student in account, but also the user. Even if I want to go downtown for an event, I want to be able to park.
Absolutely, it's balancing the needs of all users, and one thing that we talk about is the need to provide options so that everyone can make the parking decision that best meets their needs and their available resources. Ideally, everyone wants free parking, they want it close, and they want to be able to find it very quickly. When you start to have high demands, you're probably going to get 2 out of those 3. So providing those options where it might be free, but you have to walk a little further, or you can get close in, but you might have to pay a little bit more, or circle the block a few times until a space becomes available.
And there's ways to accommodate people with special needs, whether that be seniors or the disabled or whatever the challenge is, to allow them to override the current parking price of that meter or that one parking spot because they have a special permit. I mean, there's ways to do it.
And the city does have that currently, where if you do have a valid placard, I believe it's free at all meters.
Nice. So it's just like in the permitted areas, you can do similar things on Sundays, for example. Okay.
So, and again, that goes back to communications, making sure that that information's out there. In terms of Appendix C, it was actually the demand-based pricing that specific appendix was referring to. Is these are all of the blocks where we would recommend increasing the parking rates because there is that increased demand.
That's a good table. I think that shows where, I mean, 2000 reports showed it wrong and the blocks with high demand. Now we have on the table of the streets. It's good.
And then moving into a few more short-term recommendations. Apologize about that. As we mentioned previously, the downtown area does have a projected parking demand that actually exceeds the hours where parking is enforced currently. So looking at bringing on a couple of additional personnel to extend those hours to better manage that demand for both employees and customers who are downtown during those hours. Shared mobility, don't want to get too much into the TDM, but we do have a few suggestions in here to align with the update that is occurring with the multimodal transportation plan. With the shared mobility, this is a very active community, and then is something that we saw repeated throughout the visioning of each of the plans that we saw was harnessing that unique character of Durango, that it is pedestrian oriented. It's a very active community. So getting out the shared bicycle or bike share, car share options for individuals who want to have that car light or car free lifestyle. The Park and Ride Express or Park and Ride Van Pool program are 2 options of a very similar strategy. With the Express, it would be using an existing or new shuttle to connect to the existing park and rides and getting those improved to a point where they're signed, they have lights, they're a little bit more inviting, where we have anecdotally heard that there are existing carpool programs today. So leveraging that to grow that program. Or with the Park and Ride Van Pool program, it's kind of a baby step, if you will, towards a similar Park and Ride Express, where the city might sponsor vans that those carpools could then come together and use the van to commute into the downtown area with parking at the transit center or another public facility.
There's, I know of people that park closer to downtown, and for example, cycle to Riverview. Is that under the same umbrella as the, because that group of people does not need the van or shuttle, just want to have, car to park and cycle their own stretch. Is that something that would be included in this whole approach on parking ride parking spaces, or is it the other way around to get into downtown?
It could be included in it. I don't see why it couldn't be. If there's enough demand there, that of course would be the driving force of is the demand there to justify the cost for it?
And those two programs are really focused on helping reduce single occupancy
Yeah.
vehicles driving into town.
Mhm.
So bringing more people in a singular vehicle of varying sizes, van, or just putting 2 or 3 people in a car is going to help reduce the overall congestion for commuters coming from outside the downtown area, which further reduces the number of cars in the core of town. And then in the future can help reduce and slowly offset the total amount of parking supply that need to be constructed.
And maybe for council also in your knowledge, Multimodal is doing and have been doing a visioning, and they have a big drawing and they have pinpointed some parking right preferred areas that would fit very well into Richard's proposal.
Great.
For example, I think it's a North City Market, close to the street is a parking lot, and I want to be south of downtown and one would be closer to Three Springs, just to give you an idea of.
So for those parking programs, do you, with the city then, the van, be going out to outer parts, let's just say outside of Durango city limits, wherever that might be, and taking people in?
You could, with a van pool program, it would be more of a city sponsored van that would have a volunteer driver that's on that route. So it's very similar to a carpool where it's private vehicles, but this is an agency vehicle that the carpool riders then transfer to rather than a personal vehicle. Does that make?
Right, yeah. So one person's driving the van, but 5 people park there and get in the van.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. A great example of this is in the Boise area. Valley Regional Transit and Compass, I believe, is their regional transit authority there. They have one of the oldest van pool programs that has been operating in the country, and they call it Club Red. And there's significant funding available at the federal level to subsidize that for individuals. And I know there's 2 counties that heavily participate in it, but they have participants as far away as Idaho Falls, just on the state line with Washington and Boise. So
And do these park and ride programs, I've seen them a lot in larger cities. Are they very common in small cities like our size?
They're
absolutely.
extremely popular in rural communities, and
Really?
arguably some of the most important reasons to operate those in rural communities is because the travel distances for an individual coming from farther away in this county or other counties is greater than that of a larger metropolitan area. And so the economies of scale and the efficiencies and the reduction of ozone emissions from each of us driving our own vehicle
Mhm.
all the way in every day for a much larger distance can have a much greater impact than in a rural area.
So would you look farther?
Interesting.
Would you look farther than the county? Would you consider looking to Farmington, where we might have 100 people coming in commuting every day, not necessarily to work downtown, but coming in, or Mancus or something like, or some other Bayfield?
Sure, baby.
Yeah, these programs can be scaled, right? You want to get your largest bang for your buck, which is probably some of the closest people that you can reach the easiest. But then as the popularity and as well as the need grows, expand out as far as you need to.
Interesting.
Telluride and Mountain Village just started a new regional transit agency, and they're bringing van pool programs all the way in Montrose. So that's almost 2 hours.
Oh my
which is
God.
Probably about as far as Farmington is.
Yeah,
Wow, it's not even that far.
Yeah, so, you can see like that's a perfect regional example of how you can get out a pretty far distance.
It's interesting when you speak of Telluride, it would be the parking lot in Telluride that's about half a mile away from the other side. When you drive into Telluride.
Yeah.
Public parking space.
Yeah, by the
Is
lift,
that- are you familiar with that?
Mhm.
Is that something a little bit what you envision here, or is it something that you envision there that's fun? Because that, to me, seems more of a establishing a transit line for a bus. Instead of a parking lot.
I mean, I think it could be both. The Park and Ride Express option would be very similar to this Telluride example in that, it's an already established parking ride facility. The city, in this case, the city and county would maybe need to spend some initial capital to make some improvements to some of the existing parking rides that maybe aren't as formal as is that one. But then from there, that is the last stop, and then it's straight into town.
So
There's
you
no
just
more
need
pickups.
like an outside, some parking lot,
Mhm.
somewhere out, and
A
then you meet them.
collector.
Huh?
A collector location.
Collector location.
Yep.
And then you meet them out in van and. Interesting. You know, one just thought on that, Jose, is I'm looking at the sustainability plan, and it's interesting, but maybe we would see this possibly overlap with that. I'm not seeing it on here. But maybe it should be, maybe we should think of adding that. Sure. Because it's, you know, a way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions too, and then so maybe they'll help us bring that forward. And continue to bring it forward. And I'm glad it's on Multimodal's radar.
Then I'm thinking, for example, that lot, see what lot south of. Across the bridge, south of downtown.
South of downtown.
Where I always say you need to
Yeah.
have a trail that connects straight up into downtown instead of.
Santa Rita farther out.
No, Santa Rita Drive.
Okay.
That corner is a vacant CDOT lot,
Right.
open to discuss, so. And that would be a good example, it's very comparable.
Interesting, because that's relatively close. Yeah, that's a good example.
You can walk it, you can cycle it, or you can just shuttle.
I'm going to keep this moving. We've spent over half of our time.
Apologize. So now we are moving into the longer term recommendations, and with these, we didn't put too many projections on cost implications, and that's simply because as we look further out, depending on what's implemented going into these, there will be a large impact on what those FTEs or what the technologies and infrastructure would be necessary to support these. So for instance, an expanding parking management, if we are implementing neighborhood parking permit programs, we've already essentially started expanding some of that parking management. So that would reduce the long-term costs associated with some of the additional handhelds or personnel that might be necessary for expanding to other areas of the city. With the transportation wallet, you know, one of the major components of that would be a flexible parking pass. So if that is implemented, that of course will bring down the cost, as is those shared mobility options. So what services are brought into the community? Is that bike share? Is that a ride share, a van pool program? As those are developed, they can be incorporated into a transportation wallet, which could either increase the cost of that or decrease it, of course. With multi-space parking meters, this is in the long term, simply because you have meters that individuals here like to use. They are convenient. They do have the credit card payment option on them already. If we can get that mobile payment integration to occur, that will mitigate and extend the need to bring in some of those multi-space meters. But there are benefits and of course disadvantages to moving from single space to multi-space. So that's something that the city will want to weigh as your single space meters come up on the end of their useful life. With flex zones, this is very similar to the yellow curbs that are in the downtown area now. The recommendation is to expand those and again, increase communications to those delivery drivers, providing them incentive to come into downtown and complete their deliveries during the off-peak times so that they're not blocking the turn lanes, impeding access for first responders who might need to get through there, or just contributing to traffic congestion as individuals are trying to maneuver around them, or they can't use those turn lanes to turn off of Main. But that will take quite a bit of education to reach those delivery drivers. Because Durango is a little bit of a ways for many of them. So big culture change there. And then, of course, additional parking supply, the parking garage that everyone loves to talk about. This is a massive financial lift that the city will be considering. And as we've mentioned, you know, we're looking at about 10 years out or so, but that's not to say that there isn't preparation that can occur now or when the need does come for a parking garage.
How much time do you think, if we would say now, we want to do a parking garage, how much years do you expect out of the experience?
From
If we just say now, we want a parking garage, how much?
until it's open and ready to park in, about 4 years. Yeah. So that's design, construction.
I was gonna say,
Planning.
big time.
Yes, so between now and I would say, you know, in the next 5-6 years, that's a great time to start communicating with, the Durango community of, if we want a parking garage, how are we going to fund it? Because we're talking tens of millions of dollars just for a simple concrete box, as we discussed last time. So,
And being able to track how those quick wins affect distribution, demand and all that, will inform that next step. So hopefully we were able to address those issues and be able to use that money elsewhere when it goes towards a parking garage. But
Yeah, it'll be interesting, those quick wins, if they change the need in that time period, so it may push the parking garage even further in the future, at which time there may not even be a need for a parking garage, given that drivers drive cars and cars function and transportation functions and all of that. I mean,
And-
it's huge.
and Durango continues to grow. There's a lot of development that we're seeing. So if the development downtown picks up and we see more densification through conversion to residential developments or additional commercial developments, that of course isn't included in these projections. So that's why this plan is really focused on being something that is dynamic and able to adapt to Durango, and whether it progresses at a conservative pace or an aggressive pace, and providing staff that flexibility and the tools that are pre-approved for them to be proactive to provide for the community's needs.
I know you focus solely on parking and that's your expertise. But through your conversations, do you see any possibilities for increasing the transit riding? Or is that anywhere within your bailiwick?
There are definitely opportunities to it. To be honest, that is not something that we evaluated, so I can't get too specific into it, but on a general basis. With the TDM, yes, and I'm sure that's something that the multimodal transportation plan is looking into as well.
Do they, within their bailiwick, do they also look at ways of increasing transit uses, whether the role of decreasing the wait time, to the question we raised a couple of weeks ago, having a place to sit or protection from the weather while you're waiting. We have 50 stations that don't have any place for you to sit. So are those things that you look at that would help reduce the demand on parking? And it doesn't sound like you haven't done it, but I would question, do you do that as part of your work?
We do, yes. So we can, absolutely. We would be happy to for the city.
I'm not necessarily drumming up business. I just was, I just,
As part of it.
I didn't want to see it so siloed, because I do think that increasing transit ridership can also have a significant impact on reducing the
It does.
scarcity of parking or increasing the availability of parking.
Yeah,
As
so
well as
while
getting-
this, while the scope of study focused on parking primarily, it was not looked at in vain. Many of these strategies you'll notice are focused on trying to reduce people driving, and no multimodal transportation plan, regardless of the mode of travel, whether it's walking, biking, taking the bus, taking the trolley, van pool, or driving, either alone or carpool, can be done on its own, right?
Right.
A comprehensive program needs carrots and sticks. Some of the sticks here in parking management are to encourage other multimodal transit options. And so we didn't look at transit specifically, primarily because the scope of
Mhm.
issue by the city to require it, but we do that all over the country. We're currently working with the city of Steamboat on some of their transportation issues related to bus travel. And in your case, it could be bus or trolley.
Or vice
So
Yes.
with the enhanced demand-based parking pricing, where we might increase rates where there's high demands, some of those drivers will move to lower demand areas. The vast majority of them will. Some of them might choose to start using transit because parking at that point is less convenient or it's a higher cost. But there is, we refer to it as price elasticity. So you'll have some leakage to other modes of travel. So it's not looked at necessarily in a silo, but we haven't broken it out to this will convert to transit.
Understood. And finally, I did want to, just because you raised it, you said that as of 2017, we have not even met the conservative projections.
Right.
I think that's important for us to remember.
Well, in the past 40 years, we've never met the growth rates that the state of Colorado is forecasting for us either, so it's kind of interesting.
Well, if we look at the housing, we have 1100 plans on the city of 9,000, so
19,000.
9,000 houses.
Oh, houses, yeah.
So there is, I mean, if even half of that takes place in the next years, then we've exceeded the average annual growth. I think a lot of the recommendations are easy wins, for example, or no brainers in my opinion, like parking space, trailheads, October, Chapman Hill. These are individual projects. I think the demand-based pricing adjustments is good if it's not too often, so people don't get confused with now it's $5 now. But to me, we have a lot of projects going on in our city, the downtown next step, so that takes place. If the fire district building and police department building get a new use because we moved another one, that can take up a lot more requirements for parking space. Now in our building, if that doesn't become PFDF.
I struggle with it all the time because it's got the PD in there with the fire department.
So if that changes use, you're gonna have a lot of increase potential use of need for parking spaces. And we should look at long term and know what's gonna happen even in the medium term. The impact of construction on parking is, so for me personally, as one councillor, parking structure should always be on the table to start the discussion, and probably on Second Avenue, we had that discussion before, there's 2 lots on Second Avenue, because that will facilitate the bridging period when Main Street, for example, gets and given that it takes 4 years, your guess, for us, 6 years, there is a long lead time. So if we don't start that process sooner, we're going to face it fast later with real problems. So to me, a lot of the recognition, the last comment I want to make, because I'm not sure if our town is too complex enough to come up with a lot of sophisticated high-tech management or systems. To me personally, I think a lot of people come from rural areas into town and they might not want to make it too complex. I mean, for a big city, yeah, but for us, communication, of course, is very important.
And the plan 100% agrees with you on all of those points. In terms of the parking garage, it's not off the table. We've put in there the metrics that would, what's the word? Thank you. Yes, trigger the need to build that. And there's a lot of discussion in here on the need to continue to monitor the system, including what those upcoming developments are for when that need does arise for a parking garage or for any additional parking supply. And is that a garage or is that a public-private partnership where a private developer who might be building parking supply for their development could add 10, 20, 30 additional spaces that could be made publicly available? And the city could, provide some sort of incentive, whether that's direct financing or tax incentives, to share in that parking supply so that it can mitigate that need to build the parking structure. So it's just about providing options and proactively managing the system as we move forward.
No, I appreciate it. Where I struggle is if you put the parking structure at the long term, so let's say 10 years, is that the long term? Or
It is, I want to say 5 years.
5 years to start planning,
Thank you.
identifying the finance.
Invite to start planning.
so if downtown next steps will take years before that, you have a gap for so these
Okay, yeah.
things that we take into account as well.
Except that our parking isn't fully utilized at this point in time, so we still have some space for that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's why I think the interpretation is interesting, because to me, the whole detail that you showed shows we are already above suggested capacity use of the blocks from 6 to 11, to mention earlier, up to probably Main Street, Second Avenue, Main Avenue, Second, and Third Avenue. So we,
No, you just threw that in there because it's only on Main
Yeah,
that
it's-
that table is, and so they're just twisting stuff, so can we just, okay, yes. Here's some reality, on Noel night, I got a parking space right in front of Main Avenue. I drove past the transit center on Noel night at like 6 o'clock, and there was 100 spaces in there probably, like there was barely anybody in there. So twist it, you are, just stop.
Excuse me, let's stop right here. I do believe that you have taken a very specific interpretation of one data point, and you have made the point that we are not at capacity. We're not even close. We're at 80 some percent, 75, you said. When we take the holistic view, which I think we all want to take is a holistic view of what parking is available. It is not just on a street. It is not just metered parking. We are not using our public parking lots and our transit center to their capacity. I want that point to be verified
Yes.
rather than this possible representation that we are at capacity. We are not.
I think having the communications and Wade's maps available that takes it from a table form where you're looking at it for one block segment of Main Avenue between 10th and 11th or 11th and 12th. And seeing it within the context of Main Avenue and all of the adjacent streets will help provide some of the context of where we're getting that 74% rather than the 88%. On street, yes, you're very well utilized. Off street, you're very underutilized. So as you look at the system holistically, that's where we have available capacity. So we want to look at management options that can better utilize the existing resources before we make multi-million-dollar investments, because we do want to be good financial stewards for the community. So that's.
I also would like to say, I think, Wade, was it you that wrote the response to one of the questions, which is that everyone thinks someone else will use the parking garage and then they can have the parking space right in front of the store. So I think that's important to talk. You talked about behavior. And so I think that's important, that it's not necessarily build it and they will come. Because the concern I have is you can go to Santa Fe all you want and the parking garage is empty. You know, it is always empty, you know, in my mind. And yet the streets that continue to be clogged. So I'm curious about your response that everyone thinks we need it because of someone else is going to use it.
Absolutely.
I maybe talk just, because you mentioned this in our conversations about what people look for when they look for parking. First, they look on the street close by, and then they later move to other options. Maybe
Yeah.
tell them
I
the
think-
digression, so to speak.
Yeah.
Okay.
A great example of where you see this is a shopping mall. You see, one building ringed by parking because people like that direct line of sight. If it's not, 500 feet to the door that they can see, they don't want to park around the corner because it's just perception. So that's why we're really stressing the need for the increased communications,
Mhm.
because that will mitigate a lot of the struggles that we're seeing.
Good. And Melissa had a point.
So slightly different question, but I appreciate this short-term and long-term recommendations very much. And I just wanted to follow up on the topic that we just briefly discussed about potentially having to expand staffing if we're going to implement some of these. Do we have enough staffing to do some of, at least the short-term recommendations? I mean, some of these are.
Can you go back to that page? It had the 0.2 full-time equivalent.
I mean, the looking at.
But the short term had it,
I think
if you
we
just
need
started
some
with that.
outcomes out of this.
Go till, that's a completely different time frame than somebody who's working from 9 to 6.
Yeah.
And some of my employees, I will guarantee you, would say, I got a family, I'm not working until 9 o'clock.
Sure.
So we would end up needing 2 staffs. You need a staff that starts in the morning and finishes at more normal time, and another staff.
Is this to manage parking, like?
If we are going to be
Enforce it.
getting tickets.
Enforce.
Then if you have that, we need somebody pretty much all day long, cruising the neighborhood east of town. That's gonna take another person away from their
Right.
enforcement responsibilities, and it'll take them away from, we're currently cruising the entire town.
Okay.
So we start adding incrementally, we're starting to add people, possibly equipment, you now need 2 LPR vehicles.
Mhm.
So.
So interesting, so you were talking mostly about, you're talking about the enforcement side, which is absolutely a factor. And then my question was, with some of these recommendations on like, what if we were to implement the
Increased communications.
increased communications and the multi payment options instead of the single or something like that. Sign, some of those, these are gonna take, some of the recommendations will take a lot of time. If you go to the next page on some of those increased wins,
Mhm.
you know, it feels like they take, I wrote them down.
Yeah.
I can pull it up, but I don't know, you know, even like the wallet and the, you know, even just to look into Park and Ride Express, to look into adjusted parking enforcement hours, to look into all these things.
None of those things have been budgeted for,
Right.
and that's why I think we're looking at
Mhm.
trying to get this plan approved after June. And then coming back as
And
we
say-
go into the budgeting process to say, okay,
What will it take?
now we need another bus driver to run the short routes. They're gonna go out to the, just out to the parks and maybe to the express park. And so all that's gonna have to get budgeted for during next year and
Okay.
plan for. We've never done these programs. We have to learn how to do them or find somebody who can do it for us. So there's a whole management.
So that would be the
aspect.
process, which is we approve the plan first, then we kind of look at priority level, like what's our top priority, priority number one, goal number 1, 2, 3, 4 to address this. And then how is it funded? So that's all. Would it be part of the strategic planning process maybe? I mean, I don't know, or is that interdepartmental and then?
I mean, I think there's always a possibility of having a strategic planning concept, but obviously we have a lot of goals in it that would, I think, already naturally fit into it as well. So I think it's probably more of a programming that would go into a budgetary conversation as we look
Because
at.
even like the neighborhood parking permit program evidently is gonna take a lot of staff time. Yes. I mean, it's
Yeah.
And we may just need assistance kicking it off because we've never done it before. And like Chrissy was saying, there's a whole bunch of different ways that could work
right.
for that neighborhood.
I think that's a really good example is the neighborhood parking program is the staff capacity to handle that, because I think that, I mean, we're hearing from you that that is a recommendation that we should absolutely be looking at.
Absolutely.
It needs to be addressed. And so if that were to happen, that's a lot of staff time.
And there's dozens of contractors who would say, we will handle that renewal process, sending people out their stickers or their hang tags or whatever on a contract basis for you.
But developing the program with the residents is time commitment. So that's kind of, I guess, my question. But thank you for answering. That's helpful. So, you know, just it's a stepwise process, but yeah, I think that it's something we might need to have as a council in the back of our head
Mhm.
that, you know,
Could be a special appropriation mid-year next
Yeah.
year. If there's a few things we want to get done before 24. we could come back and say, here's the package we want to do right now. This is how much.
Yeah.
it'll be.
Kim, you also had a question or comment.
Yeah, a couple of things. I think, you know, building parking areas and structures is an easy thing to say, let's do that. But it might not address the issue. And by doing some of this more complicated, complex structure that we're talking about here and figuring out how this works, it might actually be the best fit. And that's what I'm interested in, is best fit for the community. And then I also wanted to mention that a lot of times when I go to towns where I know their downtown street is busy parking wise, I look for the sign that tells me where the parking lot is, because that's where I'm gonna go immediately. I'm not gonna bother trying to drive around and try to find a spot that may not exist or may exist. I'm just gonna go to the parking area. And so I think that that's the thing that people learn also, that when 3 blocks is full, you just go to the parking area. So I really like the idea of getting the signage going and
Mhm.
getting that demand, like let's try to encourage you to go park over here instead of here, because that's, I really appreciate
The signage for parking, not just for personal vehicles, but the oversized and your recreational vehicles that are so frequent.
That's huge,
in Durango.
yes.
Absolutely, getting that signage up as they're coming into town so that they know where can I park easily so that I can go enjoy myself while I'm here. I'm not circling trying to find space.
Other comments?
one other comment, just we have lots of emails on it back and forth on the communication. I guess we would do it after we were to approve, council approves this plan. I would love some, if we can try as our hardest to get the word out. I know, I think you mentioned that we'll try to do a press release to the Herald Great if they would.
Plans up on the website.
We do,
now,
we have
and
the
there's-
reporter here today.
Okay.
So the plan's up on the website. There's a comment form. I think we're taking comments through, the next week or
I
two.
think December 21st is what I asked, so that I have a day before I left for Christmas.
Wait
And then
until
I've got to
that's-
summarize this, see that.
The
Great.
plan
Yeah.
is to bring it back for the second meeting in January. Sarah's triumphant return.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
I've actually thought about, Melissa, to your point, I've actually thought about standing out in the transit center at 6 o'clock at night and saying, all right, I'm here in the transit center. There's 15 spaces. I mean, I'm thinking about what counselors can do
You
is,
know, Tim Wall has literally done that.
You
He's
know.
taken videos and he's like, here I am.
and it's empty and it's 6 o'clock dinner hour.
Well, and just like you
It's
said, that
really
steps up
impactful.
for communication and like letting people know where those spots are for free or for
Yeah.
less cost. It's super, I think it's super important. So that's like one of her primary goals. And I think doing all these little things with the neighborhood program for Third Ave and then the better signage and then seeing where do our big trigger points still and would a parking garage even solve that? And I don't know if it would, to be honest, but I think it's exciting to see the next steps and hopefully alleviate some of the pressure points we're seeing.
So the timing of next steps, when does this come before?
January 17th, I think it is.
Oh, the steps.
The parking plan?
Yeah.
Yeah, January 17th, adoption of your resolution.
And will there be any other additional public? Not, I mean, you've done so much outreach already. Is there anything else planned?
Well, at this point, we've got a plan up on the website.
Great.
Okay.
And I've talked with Tom about trying to keep that. Josh, trying to see what we can do to get more people to see it's there, make whatever comments they've done. A lot of the comments we start to get at this point are more or less repetitive, they're already in here, or there's anything that they like or don't like. But we'll get all those summarized and see if there's any adjustments necessary for the 17th.
And just for the record, because we had this communication by email, but that you had mentioned, I had asked about bid approving this and you had all, mentioned that Tim Walsworth and bid has been actively involved throughout representing the businesses. I think it's important for just that message to be out there as well.
Yes, actually, Tim and I communicated when I was walking in.
Okay, great.
He's been a super active and supportive member, and he essentially is saying he supports everything in here, but he still wonders at what point do we trigger having a downtown parking garage.
Okay,
So be a little further, he wasn't done yet.
well, and like Ken was saying, if we do certain steps, it may, kind of have an impact on our demand. So it'll be interesting to monitor it.
And it's important to recognize that with or without a garage, under any time frame, many of these strategies are still necessary for the community as a whole to have a good multimodal active transportation system. So it's not one or the other, it's both in combination.
Very good. Thank you. You had a full, you stayed well within the time frame. I appreciate it. Council, we are 20 minutes ahead of schedule, 25 or so.
15.
No, we're supposed to be done at 3:45 and, oh, is that what it is? 3:30? Okay.
So we're not even minutes.
Right, but our next meeting starts at 3:55. Yeah.
So take a 10-minute
Yeah.
break now.
So what I'm going to suggest is council, I'm going to suggest we take, excuse me? Can I just have council's attention for a moment? I'm going to suggest, because I think people may be coming that want to hear about the pickleball, so I don't want to start
yeah.
too soon.
Sure.
So that's my concern.
Okay.
So I'm going to suggest we come back at 10 of, that's a 15-minute break.
Great.
And we might start a few minutes early from that time period. Okay,
Sounds good.
15 minutes, we'll be back at 10 of.
No, that's super.
Oh,
that's
yeah, you're right.
It's Wayland. No, there's nobody here.
I wish,
I was wrong.
I would be so happy if it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
And then I was asking, like. For here. Testing.
Exactly.
and then we all share it. How do you make it more exciting was my next question.
Yeah, I think us sharing one helps for sure, like, so when.
Yeah.
Like, if you look at the posts that like you and I have shared, I know, those are like 500 times more.
Right.
You know, comments on and stuff, and then you have, like, there's like 5 reasons people follow businesses on social media, it's a little different, but it's like entertaining content. It's product news and advice, and so it's like you hitting all of those like 5 pillars of content.
Yeah. Okay, like,
So
like,
like
it's like,
So here's what- can this happen? Because for me to do all of that posting.
Not have-
No, we
So is there a way that we can allow like farming to auto post things to our site, to our Facebook page, for example?
So like if you had a business. Like person, no. No, I don't think so.
No, but you could send us an email.
And
say,
ask
here's
for-
the link.
And then we could just.
All this drop,
Yeah.
like right to Facebook or wherever.
But it's also with.
We could like it and share it.
What's also hard to with government entities is that the more, and this is something for us in staffing and costs, is that the more you are sharing and posting and we're doing, the more we're apt to have controversy and having to mitigate
But,
stuff.
and I'm not sure what our job is in that.
Right, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
But
I'm
I-
not sure that's our
So,
job.
so if that is the reason we might have to have more like PR people, you know, helping like mitigate some of the things that
Like.
that we're not supposed to.
Yeah.
but I wonder, couldn't we even have like a flashing light that says 15 parking spaces in the transit center?
Well, yeah.
Oh,
10
Exactly.
10 parking spaces in the transit
Sure,
center,
but again-
right across Main Avenue.
I think. I think
What?
I-
You can get people to go to the transit center. I should have free spaces.
Yeah.
Like 15 free spaces, first come, first served.
Exactly, or something.
I swear there was maybe 15 cars in the transit center on Noel Night.
Yeah,
And I parked literally right in front of the main mall, right in front of the main mall.
but even if we said that, like, here's a sign, there's 15 spaces available, looking for parking, transit center has 15 right now. Right. Yeah, I don't know, I
But
just,
you know, the technology it would take to do that is fairly significant.
yeah,
And there's also a little bit of like, okay, you talk about signage and bigger signage and like how you want it to look.
Right.
And like,
Right.
the gaudier the sign, the more you'll notice it, but I don't know if we want that in our,
Right.
you know what I
Right.
mean? Like, and so it's like
Get the
the.
word out to the local.
Yeah.
It's interesting because when I drive downtown, I don't. My son does.
I had to go.
My son is the one that was like, oh, mom, go by drive to the transit center and see how, because he hears me like complain about like all those, like, go by the transit center, let's see how many spaces are there. I'm like, okay, well.
Yes.
Not funny. Well, you know what, we also see them all the time, so we can kind of.
Yeah, look, well, and I'm not looking for it, 'cause I know where I want to
Right,
park.
I know where I'm gonna put
Yeah,
it,
versus if I'm somewhere else.
or I'm
I'll
gonna
be
ride
like,
my bike and walk my bike up.
Yeah.
That's usually why I don't look for it.
Interesting stuff. You know, maybe I should. But.
Topic now is the pickleball courts at Schneider Park. And first of all, Turi and team, thank you for preparing the information in advance and getting us to us. And City Manager Jose, did you have any introductory remarks on this?
Yeah, I'm gonna let Terry take it on.
Then here we go.
Great, thank
We have half an hour for everything, questions and presentation.
We'll keep our presentation relatively brief to allow discussion afterwards and some presentation or some commentary and for us to communicate future directions. But my name's Sri Naikin, Parks and Recreation Director. With me is Lee Petty with DHM. He's been working with us to design the pickleball courts, first initially over at Fort Lewis College, and then we've transitioned over to Schneider Park. And then, of course, I think you all know Scott McLean, our Parks Assistant Director. So we did have a meeting September 6th to discuss pickleball court. We had two options at that time. We had a pretty lively discussion about which option would be we would want to pursue in terms of placement of pickleball courts. We kind of got direction that Schneider Park was the direction we wanted to go. At that time, we also did get a few questions that were asked towards us, and we taken a little bit of time to move the design process along at Schneider Park, as well as try to answer some of those questions. We do have a little presentation, and then we'll provide some additional information after the presentation on trees and things like that at the site. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lee, who's going to kind of go through these.
Thank you. Thanks, Terry. Thank you everyone for meeting with us today. I'm really excited about, like everybody, seeing Durango, a lot of people about football. So one of the concerns was just sound and how that may affect the adjacent neighborhoods. And so we kind of did a simple sound study. Now, we're not professional sound experts or engineers. What we did was just research kind of the decimal levels of pickleball from certain sites. We have a one pickleball site that was shared with us, as well as I believe it was the acoustic noise, which is a sound engineer who had recently done a sound study, and so we got links and information from them on kind of what to expect. And we came across just kind of show you in this perspective. So 58 at 400 feet is the decimal level of pickleball play. And so whenever we're also looking at pickleball, it's important to note it's not a consistent noise. It's kind of that first noise, and they kind of call that it's like two pieces of wood hitting together. That can be annoying, and it's not consistent. It's not consistent just with the amount of play. So that's what we learned from some of our research. And so they recommended, this sound engineer in his website recommended anything over or within 400 feet. If there's residential play or residents within 400 feet, you probably need to do some sound mitigation. And so we kind of looked at this. So 58 decimals is where we're at 400 feet, and 70 decimals where we're at 100 feet. So we want to see also within the river trail corridor what that looks like. And so in comparison, it's also, I just want to point out, like vacuum cleaners about 80. So we have more noise. Other things like a sound engineer would take into account is the ambient noise from also like the whitewater of the river, the road noise from both Camino del Rio and Nines and Rusa. So there's a bunch of other elements that can be considered in a full sound study. But just looking at the decimal levels is kind of what we did.
Can I just make one point though?
Yes.
Going back to the decibels, I do know something about that because I live downtown near a lot of music and bars. And above, you say sounds above 70 can harm hearing over time. And I know that 70 decibels from a bar would make it hard for me to fall asleep at night. So I don't know where you're getting those numbers, but I do know that they're exponential, they're not linear.
That's true.
And every time you go up 10 degrees, it's almost as if it has a multiplying effect of how it sounds perceived. So I'm just curious with those numbers because I look at decibels a lot.
Yeah, and again, I'm a novice at decimals, and so again, I pulled a lot of this from these two websites, and one of them is specific to the pickleball group, and so that's kind of how they use it.
And with the caveat for both of these, even in these studies that were online, they said each site is unique. And so that's something to consider as well. But in this kind of preliminary look, we just want to look at the radius and decimal levels first and present that to this group and see if we need to go a step further.
Yeah, I just would say that a normal conversation at 75 would probably not harm your hearing over time, but you do have sounds above 70 decibels can harm hearing, and that is standard knowledge.
That's right.
So I don't know where the other numbers are coming from, but
Gotcha. Yeah, thank you. And another one to point out, I was looking at the old city of Durango ordinance and things within a neighborhood is 55 decibels. If it's 90% of the time or greater in a residential neighborhood, have to be mitigated. So that'd be like an air conditioner unit and that type of thing that goes consistently. And then also other ones for, I think I was looking at the noise of like vehicles in the city ordinance. And it said 88 is the loudest decimal level for motorcycles. So if that kind of gives it a perspective of how the city currently utilizes sound mitigation, and that type of thing. So this is a quick look at just a radius of everything. This,
I apologize. We did not get this one in your packet previously, so I think this is a new.
that's why I'm bringing it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This one?
yeah,
No, the previous page.
Oh,
I would have raised it otherwise. I didn't see it.
Previous.
Did I miss it? No, not this page,
The previous page wasn't.
this one wasn't.
because I would have raised it.
It's in the packet.
both of them?
I missed
I'm
it.
looking at it right now.
The one, the previous one, with the bars on it?
Huh, okay.
This one.
No,
My,
those are bars.
my apologies. I would have raised the question
I haven't seen the bars.
before.
And just looking at decimal levels, so this is at 400 feet. So what we're looking at this of this first orange area. And again, just looking at the radius, not taking into account other ambient noises. But we're looking at about 58 decimals based off of our research at 400 feet. And so we're catching a corner of the new River Roost Apartments over here. And then also the Hilltop House up in just below the cemetery. And then I know there was some discussion in part to the neighborhood or the apartment complex. So River Bridge Apartments is just outside of, I believe this is 600 feet. So they're outside of 600 feet. And then also the residential neighborhood is a bit further. It's also important to note as far as placement of this, the skate park is in very close proximity to River Bridge Apartments. So, and I know there's a sound associated with that maybe Scott can speak to if there's any questions as far as earlier studies to that. But areas of concern for us would, since this is changing, would be just maybe the River Roost Apartments. Maybe there is some mitigation that needs to take place because that is with just slightly within the 400-foot radius. So that's kind of where we're looking. And the other elements to consider, this is a quick section to show like the Hilltop House and the Sparrow Apartments and the cemetery further up. There is some sound mitigation that happens along this slope that's helping give some separation as well. And then looking across the river, there's also, we see Camino del Rio on the other side. So there's definitely generates a decimal level along that side. So that's, in a nutshell, it's just our simple research on sound. We do have, I can update the team on the design, but we want to look a little bit.
Yes, question on the sound.
Yes.
What if you decide to do mitigation efforts on sound? What are they? What do you do?
Yeah, there's some good alternatives. The best thing for blocking sound is just a solid wall, or some solid barrier. Vegetation really doesn't block sound as well as you might think. But like berms, there are some things that you'll see along interstates that people do to block sound. But what we're considering is this 1/8-inch plastic that's actually developed for pickleball courts, as a sound mitigation, as an alternative to the design.
And you put that around the pickleball court.
You put that around it. So if you see like the windscreens around tennis courts, it'd be like that, but it'd be solid green. That's couldn't see. And so they're,
And we did get some cost estimates on that. I think it was right around $13,000 or $14,000
Okay.
to do that.
it's already run, apparently the sound is still on, so anyway, okay, just, gotcha.
You want us to stop or?
Yeah, just momentarily, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. 35,000.
35. We're good?
Yeah.
But we probably, if we look at it, we might not have to put, you know, that mitigation all the way around. We could
Yeah.
mitigate directionally for like hilltop or for.
Which would be really a lot nicer,
Mhm.
also for the players, because it's, I mean, it's so beautiful. It'd be nice not to be locked in.
Yeah, of course, our preference would be have it as open as possible.
Absolutely,
for
yeah.
sightlines and everything like that, but
Right.
we also want to make sure that we're mitigating what we should.
And are these things that you could put up after the fact if you found that you needed to?
I
Okay.
believe so.
Yes, sure could. They just attached to the fence like you would with the screen.
Okay.
And Lee did also reach out to someone who could do a sound study, and that's what was 12,500. If we wanted to do a full-fledged sound study, we could do
Okay.
that. That would be an additional cost. And we might be able to do that if you want before, we could do it after and determine if we need to do that. So we have some options there.
Mhm. Thank you.
This is very similar to the concept that we developed before. Elements that have changed is we're looking a little more about a linear storm quality system, stormwater quality system, kind of like a bioswale, doing some sheet flow on this on these roads, mainly because they're just not generating a whole lot of bad elements that you would get from like a parking lot that you need heavier water quality. So we're working through that with city engineering, and you're on the team this time. We still also have a little amphitheater seating area or just seating area at one end of the court as well. One thing that as we develop,
Could you go back?
yes,
I have a question. If others don't have a question, I do want to raise one. On the stormwater ponds,
mhm.
so are those going to look like what it looks like as you're coming into town, as you look at the CDOT stormwater pond? Is that what we're going to see?
I will hope not. That is not my goal at all. So no, those are pretty, we want something that's a gentle swell that isn't noticeable. Our hope is that we can even eliminate a couple of these ponds, at least this furthest one on the north side, because kind of our gentle slope is going towards the south. So we may utilize this one here, but per code, we don't necessarily have to develop a new pond to mitigate for any runoff on an existing hardscape. So we may hold off on this one at this time, but do one a little closer to the turnaround as an ad alternate whenever we do the turnaround. But stormwater is definitely something that we're looking at and still working through the details. We're about a 30% design development at this time.
Mhm.
And
And
if you look at the stormwater ponds that developments are required to do, they're usually quite attractive.
yeah, I was hoping, like the
It's not
ones
just a
that,
big hole in
the ones at
ground.
Three Springs are quite attractive, but I wanted to make certain that we were not going to be stuck with something.
Absolutely.
And then finally, just because I remember a person asking it some time ago, any trees that'll be taken down in this spot right here?
I believe
There's a red oak tree that I think falls just about the corner of the four courts in the center there, so that'll need to come out. It is like a 15-inch diameter. We're looking into what it would take to spade that. There's nobody local that has equipment to spade that. We'll talk to somebody in Denver who's working on getting us a price for that. and just
What's
kind of
spade?
to take,
Transplant it.
yeah, grab the root ball, everything, we'll be able to
Good.
pick it up. Thought initially would be if we do that, we'll do it within the park, just it's easier, it's cheaper, it's less
Nice.
movement on the tree, but try to still have it someplace there in the park. So we're looking into that, we'll get a number. And then we've got 4 other trees that were planted 2 years ago, so they're still small enough. We should have to get somebody a little bit closer to Durango to spade.
And will you have a communications plan to the public around these trees that'll need to come down?
Yeah, yes, we will do that, and then we also communicate with the council on, you know, what the number is when we get number for spading versus replacement. We decide to do that or can do.
And we can also add additional.
Right,
That's what we
right.
think is a good-
And then my last question on this, when I look at this picture, is with our sustainability plan in mind, how will we offset the carbon emissions that are being created through this project?
We did talk a little bit about sustainability and some of the things that we could incorporate into it, mainly about water and how we could use the water that comes off and relocate it or redirect it to planters and things like that. So we have started having some of those conversations, but we haven't done a measurement of carbon emissions or anything like that to do calculations on what we would need to offset.
Because it would have impacted us, the cement and the removal of trees would have a carbon footprint that we're trying to reduce.
Yeah, every building we work on the fire.
I know, I think we need to,
police department, everything we do is going to have.
so that's why I'm asking if they're considering that now and we'll be able to quantify it.
We can look into that.
Okay. I asked the same question of the fire department. What's your plan for addressing the carbon footprint? Good, thank you. Those are my questions on that.
Very good. And the next thing we're going, that came up is parking is kind of, is a concern. So many people mentioned that in the Parks and Recreation Board. And so what we have lined, strapped here, about 28 spaces. And then we looked a little closer into what could be strapped across 9th Street. So we could gain probably another 29 parking spaces. This would serve both pickleball as well as the river put in. And so definitely something that could be picked up. So per city calculations for courts or for tennis courts, you need 18 spaces for the number of courts we're creating. And so I feel like we're really meeting that need if we're able to strike that the river access. And this wouldn't necessarily be paved. I think we could do something like, if we do choose to do this, something like Night Horse was with a nylon strap or something to delineate the parking. That way we're not creating more impermeable surface.
Given some of the community issues, this might be something we want to hold off on until we see what the uses and the parking needs are, but we just wanted to let you know that there is an option out there.
These are just a few quick images of how this would sit on the side. One of the interesting things you'll see along Rusa or this little parking area, this is recessed about 3 feet based off grade. So we're getting sound mitigation on that side because most of it will happen below 3 feet. So that's really great. And then we have, it allows for a shorter fence over there. And then we're just stepping down to another 3-foot retaining wall or so along the river trail.
Why is it for sound mitigation 3 feet?
There would still be some, yes, that's true. It's not totally why we're doing it. It's just really to save on some cutting and grade fill in this area, but it does provide some mitigation. And then one of the, it does provide some. And we could lower even another foot or two to gain a little more mitigation if we want. We just get a little bit of trouble.
When you measure sounds, it goes by the impact. So if you reduce it some, it does not mean you reduce the decibel level.
Mm-mm.
You reduce the amount of time you hear that high decibel level. So you're really not doing anything.
It reflects it off though and keeps it more toward the center.
Does that make sense what I just said?
Yes, it does. That, yes.
So if sound mitigation is necessary, then this 3 foot is not going to satisfy whatever 7 decibel or whatever the number ends up being that is required.
Right. And that's why we really look closer at the distance versus just any mitigation. I kind of consider this a little bit of passive mitigation in that side. It's an advantage with having it a little lower. It's kind of how I see it. But
So the scenario is, if it works like this is great, but in the worst case, and there's still the sound, and decibels are too high, it has to go up 6, 7.
Probably another 4 feet. What we're proposing, and just for example, so this would be 3 feet and then 4-foot fence along the top. So that would be a 4-foot sound wall that we had to mitigate on that side. So on top of the 3 feet. So you'd have a 7 foot on that side. Now, on the river trail, we were proposing an 8 foot fence. And so that would require, I don't know if they leave a gap at the bottom. I don't know how that works. I'm one little research that I don't know need to do, but 8 feet of mitigation on the river trail side would be necessary. So it does reduce the amount of mitigation we have to do forward. And the neat thing, one thing I like about this design is you can look over the fence, it says you're coming in, just an interesting feature. From the parking lot, yes, sir. And here, it's kind of a view you would have from the river trail, a few steps up to the pickleball courts, but showing kind of what that retaining wall would look like. And then the terrace seating in the background.
I really like the terrace seating idea.
Turned out really good. We're playing with the idea of utilizing boulders now to create a little more of a natural feel, and just this hardscape, urban feel. So it's kind of what Scott's asked me to go a little further now.
Okay.
I would prefer to not see so much concrete.
That's correct. It'd be, if you've been to the skate park on that north end, it'd be similar to that setup where we've got boulders chasing concrete. So that's kind of where we're at in these concepts.
Just a few administrative things. Now that we're at 30%, we did get an initial estimate and we have value engineered a few things out. So right now we're at the $800,000 budget where we what we put into the CIP plan for 2023. So we're trying to make sure that we're cognizant of that and staying within budget. Restrooms is one thing that I maybe want to bring up a little bit later on down the line, because I know the restrooms we have there are in they're not great. So we have, I forget who you hired.
We have proposals due tomorrow, the 7th, a couple different architects to do some evaluation. Prefab restrooms compared to stick built or designing it.
So we're looking into trying to maybe develop one bathroom standard that we can place at various parks. Once we get that information, we may come back to you and talk a little bit about, well, maybe we can move up the Schneider Park project a little bit quicker for the bathroom replacement. So just wanted to let you know that we're thinking of that as well.
Yeah, I went by there yesterday and just reinforced that those bathrooms really need some attention anyway.
Yeah.
And I think that if this is the impetus for that, it's good.
Yeah. So we'll take that into consideration and we'll potentially come back to you and talk to you about the CIPs a little bit more, maybe, because right now we have about a $780,000 or so $750,000 cushion in the 2023 CIP plan. And we budgeted $550,000 for Schneider Park restrooms in 2027 or something like that. So there is potential for us to do a little bit later.
Can I clarify? Can you go back to this slide that had the mitigation? So you will be putting in the 7-foot fencing that faces the park?
The fencing's included, yes. All
Not
that,
the-
8 foot.
Not the screening, but fencing, because you don't want the balls going.
The sound, but it's not the sound mitigation
the
fencing.
sound mitigation is right now an ad alternate at $35,000. And my thought, and we could talk about it, but my thought would be wait and maybe we could see what the impacts are once it's built and then we can go back and retrofit it if we need be.
There was some conversation at the Parks and Rec board that, like that corner that kind of faces the river roost, that corner might need some sound mitigation where maybe other parts didn't. And so until it was actually built and people were using it, it might be more efficient to see how that actually functions.
So within proximity of that site, if somebody wanted to like be sitting down reading a book or having a family picnic, I'm trying to think of places that they can go where they don't have to listen to the thumping of pickleball, because that would be very loud. They're not the 350 feet away living. They're trying to use the park for another purpose
They would be hearing pickleball play throughout the park.
throughout the park.
Yep, if there's pickleball being played.
I think, so this has gone to the Parks and Rec and staff. So the Parks and Rec recommends Smithfield, staff recommends Smithfield. Pickleball players recommend Smithfield. And the majority of council chose to go in this direction. My question is more to council, is there a need to reassess that approach based on what we've learned today on the additional costs for the noise mitigation, the impacts to the water, noise, regardless of the noise, and the visual impact of having a high noise mitigation barrier between pickleball courts and if there is no redirection from council, then
I would just like, I would just like to say, if you do decide to have that conversation, I want to put out the caveat that we have gone down, we're now at 30% PDs at Schneider Park.
Exactly.
We did not get to 30%. We got a pretty good set of conceptual over at Fort Lewis, so we would be kind of backtracking, adding time, adding costs. And things
So
like
what you skewed a little bit was pickleball community was split, pretty 50-50 for either Snyder or Smithfield. Park staff was pretty split and didn't really care either way or the other when they presented that. Both of those were actually said. And so it was more about cost, and which is why Parks and Rec staff came with the Smith Sports Complex originally.
I
That's
think
what.
the vote at the Parks and Rec Board wasn't 100%.
Yeah, and so it wasn't everyone wanted Smith Sports Complex, but council went a different way. So again, let's try not to skew things in a way that fits your narrative. I would say that I feel like the use of this park and the renovations of the restrooms and like the potential for mitigating sound where it needed, there would be sound mitigation that would have to be done probably up at Smith Sports Complex too, because of all the residential that's around that as well. So to say that that is the reason why we shouldn't build it here that doesn't really make sense. The only thing I'm cognizant of is it is taking away green space, but I'm hopeful that we can kind of move those trees, like you said. And so I'm not in support of having that conversation again and delaying the process again. I'm in support of what we're doing and the progress we're making here.
And to add on to Jessica's conversation, I would agree with everything that she said, and I don't support another conversation. Also, you know, what I really like about this too, in contrast with Fort Lewis College, is that we aren't going to be having the potential conflicts with other user sports and other youth programs. And we're really taking advantage of a park here that has been underutilized. And the added potential vibrancy to downtown is just great. I can tell you that pickleball is exploding, and people, I can just envision once we redo Rusa Avenue, people driving down Rusa Avenue and seeing this, it's going to be a draw. This is it will be a large draw. And I've already had conversations. I have a lot of conversations with people about this location of the pickleball community, and people are excited. There are a lot of people who are very excited to get on the river trail and ride their bike, to play pickleball, and then to go downtown and get, you know, a coffee or whatever it is, go about their day. So there's a lot of excitement about this location and being able to, you know, do no driving. You don't have to get in your car. A lot of people will not have to get in their car to access these courts, which is really something to consider as far as the green goes as well. And I can tell you that I'm hearing a lot of very positive feedback on my end, and very, very little negative about the fact that we aren't going to FLC, like none. Yeah. Zero.
And,
Can I make a little point of clarification? I pulled up the agenda package because implying that I skew information. There's two statements I would like to make to rectify misunderstandings. The pickleball community intends a general consensus for pickleball in this location. Smithfield was favorable. A little bit later, it says the Parks and Rec Advisory Board suggested Smithfield 4.2, 4 against 2. And I am not opposed to any of these recommendations. I follow whatever the majority of council decides. And there's some more additional information. And I just brought up the point for me to reassess that. And there was no skewing of information.
And to add, I think that interesting that to hear the answer that noise mitigation is feasible and doable at a relatively reasonable cost if we had to. And so that doesn't concern me as much, you know, for relatively to this project, and the added benefit to this area is significant. And so I think that that's good for me to know as far as the implication, the mitigation opportunities that we can do once we figure out if it's needed.
And I would like to jump in that I appreciate the work that's gone into it. My biggest concern is the sound so that people can enjoy the park who don't necessarily want to play pickleball. So I think it needs to be a park for all. So I appreciate looking at it and I think the fact that we're budgeting and have a plan for how to address it. Because I do think that I see a lot of people sitting on the other side of the river and then down by the river who are just reading a book or writing in a journal and, you know, and doing things there. So that's my biggest concern and I appreciate you looking at that.
You know, oh, sorry. go ahead, finish and then
The other thing I was gonna say could you go to the slide on the parking? Because it looked to me like you would be, are you gonna be very close to pulling out into traffic?
On the,
Not on that one.
Yeah.
On the other one, right there, where you have the angular parking.
right, we are getting a little bit of turnaround in this area to make it, but there's enough room to not back directly into traffic. There's a
So,
little bit of an atypical type of layout, but it's an existing layout that we're not necessarily.
I just was wondering about people coming in and people trying to back out and
There's
it,
parking.
yeah, and I still was wondering about it because I think there's a potential there. I just was curious, you know, as I saw it.
That's a good point. I will bring that up to civil engineer. I mean, if we had to go parallel, you would lose probably
I understand that.
5 spaces. But we could, it's something that we can look at and I'll ask him to look into that.
It just looked like you might be pulling out, somebody's pulling in and, you know, or if you needed to make it some kind of a one-way entrance and exit. I didn't know.
That's a great point. I think we can look a little further into.
Can I just add to your point about safety or about enjoyment
Noise.
of the park? You know, one of the pieces of feedback that I'm also hearing that people are very excited about for better utilizing this part of the park is that we have a lot of residents who do not feel safe running on the river trail and or walking on the river trail at this location and further south. And I think that's a real issue. There are other residents who want to enjoy this area, not just for pickleball, but as a throwaway. And I've had several people say that they will not go that direction anymore. It's as far as safety concerns. So I think that by better utilizing this park and making it more available to all residents for different uses may help in a lot of ways. So you might not have someone sitting there reading a book, but you might have 10 people running by now because they feel safe.
Yeah.
And so there's different uses, you know, that this may actually bring a higher use of this area. Just thought that I could really hear a lot of concerns about safety in this area. And further south as well, underneath the bridge, so. Just thought.
And just FYI, under Main Street Bridge, there's a. That's
Yeah.
yesterday. Sorry.
And then for me, my final part was I do appreciate, because I do think we need to know what the carbon cost is of any project we do, not just this one, but I think as part of our commitment to sustainability, we need to know that everything we do comes with a cost and we need to measure that.
And then we need to add in number of people who don't drive their cars anymore, but ride their bikes. And to your point, you ride their bikes past that area.
Yeah.
And
but-
ride their bikes to that area rather than driving their cars. So this is a huge, it's not just about the concrete or the grass that goes in it, it's the entire system. So.
I understand
if we want
that.
to do that, we have to take into account the entire system.
I understand that, but I think we have to start with measuring what is the impact.
Of the entire system.
Understood, but that may be harder to set your metrics.
So then you can't just measure half of it.
Well,
And
I'm
say
not,
the half of it is the bad part. You have to measure.
I'm not suggesting that is, I'm just suggesting that this project comes with a cost and you should come back with some way to measure it.
And it comes with a benefit. We should be able to measure also.
Understood.
We'll look at it, and try and see if we can present it in a manner that you know.
I'm sure Marty Poole can help you.
One thing while I'm looking at this design right here, I wanted to make sure we set expectations. The turnaround area right now is we put it on the design, but it is value engineered. It's about an $80,000 piece of the project. So it's one, I just didn't want you to see this. Oh, we're gonna get that turnaround. So that's
Sure
not
would be
me.
nice. How do you turn around otherwise?
Yeah, you can.
Just like you do right now. It's
Oh,
kind of a
okay.
square area.
Okay, so you can do that.
So that's all included in the,
It is not, it's about, we kind of put it below the line, so if we find some money and we can get it in, we'll put it in, but right now it's not included in the 800,000.
so that would be the total cost we estimate.
Well, if we included everything that we have, we were probably in the 900 to $1 million range, but we trying to keep it under budget, so.
And does that have to be concrete?
The
The road, the parking and the,
well, the road, it's already concrete or
Right.
asphalt, so. we
but you're not
don't-
gonna tear it
we're
up
not
and
gonna tear it up
okay,
and
that's what I want.
Yep. So we don't want to necessarily change the surface type.
Okay,
And then just also timeline wise, we're looking at getting to 75% DDs at December 21st and final design hopefully early February. We're trying to push this along relatively quickly so we can get it out to bid and hopefully we'll find a contractor who wants to build it.
Okay, so timeline, again, out to bid in February,
Potentially, yes.
Potentially.
We're hoping to get to that point.
and then you'd start building as soon as the like ground lets you probably, or
Yeah.
well,
So I understand contractors are pretty,
hard to come by.
yes, so
Yeah.
I think that's what we're gonna be. That might be some of our tripping points in terms of trying to get it in as quick as possible. So just wanted to let you know that we're trying to move it along. So.
I appreciate it. You're starting early, that is good. And you had originally suggested maybe July completion, correct? Is that right?
Well, depends on the contractor.
yeah, that's early.
It seems early.
It might be early, yeah,
Yeah, it seems like it.
unless you guys have. any-
Unless it's easy. Huh? It feels early.
It may be, it's just, I mean, contractors, it all comes down to that right now. It's just-
And now,
Yes.
another question, so for timeline, so this will be managed and run by Parks and Rec?
Mhm.
Just like the rec center is, the rec center pickleball program,
Mhm.
Or
correct?
the tennis
Or
court,
the tennis courts, yeah.
Or the tennis,
like adjacent to,
so, okay,
for the tennis courts at Smithfield.
because like, will they be managed like at the rec center where they have different levels of play at different times, blah, 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 blah?
Yeah, we could work with the pickleball community to come up with some.
I would
sort of-
recommend you work with them.
It's a good question.
So I am going to interject that we are over schedule, so I am
You mean
looking
overtime,
overtime, yeah.
Yeah,
okay,
that's all I had to share, so.
Finally, I did want to ask, on the trees, please, I do want to make certain that we're communicating to people about that because I don't want to have the same thing happen, and none of us want to have the same thing happen that happened with the trail. So, and again, it's another
Trust me, I
situation.
don't wanna have that.
That was your.
Day one on.
Yeah.
So I do want to hear of a good rollout plan to communicate that. Thank
and
you.
please do work with the pickleball community, if you will, as is the appropriate, but they're pretty involved.
Great. Now, let's see. Thank you.
Great. Oh my goodness, okay, where are we now?
We are going to the CIPs and we are scheduled to end at 4:55.
Right.
Yes. No, I will. It was my yeah. I don't know. Interesting. Yeah.
Mayor and council, we do have Jennifer Holland, our CIP manager, to give an overview on our capital improvement projects update. Elizabeth is under the weather with a pretty bad back, but she is virtual if there is any questions that we may need. But I think Jennifer has us in very capable hands with her. So,
Thank you.
Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you. Good afternoon, counselors and Mayor. I apologize, this was not in the folder. I do not know if you have this.
Yeah.
You do have it. Oh,
Yes.
wonderful. Thank you. So glad to hear that. All right, so I am here to provide you an update on the CIP division's progress and accomplishments in our inaugural year. When I first came to speak with you in March about the plan for implementing the new CIP division, I was the sole employee working in the division. Let's see, there we go. We now have 6 employees, including me. And we can have the hire dates there, so you can see that finding, hiring qualified personnel took an average over 6 months, up to 10 months for the transportation project manager. The streets manager and I oversaw the transportation projects this summer, as we did not have Barney or Dallas on board at that time. Onboarding efforts for these employees includes things like the computers and the phones and the offices and basic supplies and tools for field inspections. Vehicles have proven more challenging. We've been using our personal vehicles and paying people mileage. But Tom Kramer was able to get us 2 Chevy Colorados ordered today. So hopefully early next year, we will have some vehicles for our folks. We are now supporting the various departments in their design efforts with constructability reviews for projects in design now and scheduled for construction next year. And we're also doing reviews of designs, design requests for proposal documents when they ask us, and also doing respondent evaluations on those as well. We're still working on trying to express to the other divisions exactly how much we would like to support them through all of those and getting that comfort level and building those teams with that. Standardized procurement documents for all of the projects. That includes the general conditions that have been revised, subsurface utility engineering requirements, and updating the inventory data for completed projects, which is primarily for utilities at this point. But as we complete a project, we want to make sure that all that information is updated in our systems for folks going forward to be able to use and know about. We have standardized construction management policies, including the engineering requirements for traffic control and stormwater management, the submittal reviews and daily inspection reports, and change order management and pay application processing. So we've got a book about this big. When folks come in, welcome, welcome to the city of Durango, here you go. And a big fat book to show them what our policies and procedures are for handling these things. And of course, we will be tweaking those as we move forward and learn things. We're sharing information. We have our weekly CIP project coordination meetings with engineering, Parks and Rec, multimodal, streets, and utilities personnel. We now have a CIP division webpage. It has our mission and key function information, plus a link to the OpenGov budget information on the projects. And we're working with IT on adding another link so that they can go to a capital projects map within GIS and see where the different projects are at an actual project boundary, not just the pinpoint one like on the OpenGov, but at the project boundary. And then when they click on that, they can see information about the schedule, the basic scope, and also contact information if they would like to speak with the project manager and get some more information about that project. We are still working on that link. We have the map built, but the link is not working quite right yet. So IT is still working on that with us, but we're close. We also get all of our project record documents to OnBase and fed into GIS and also to Lucity. Lucity is our work order system, and it pulls a lot of information from GIS, but then our maintenance staff use Lucity for when they go out in the field to do a water repair or something like that, and they can click in there and get a lot of information about the pipe that they're working on. As we build these projects, we're also attaching the project documents to that pipe. So when they go in there, they can see when it was replaced, what the material is, all of that information, our as-built submittal documents, that sort of stuff can also be there for them to access easily. So now we have some basic processes in place for our new division, subject to changes, as I said, as we learn and grow. Come on, baby. Thank you. Okay. So now for what you really want to know. That was just kind of the base for how we can get the work done. Now, what you guys want to know is what work are we getting done? So for 2022 capital projects, all projects that were brought to CIP division for construction in 2022 have gone to bid within a month. All projects that received bids proceeded to contracting and construction. So Parks and Recreation projects. We did some work at the recreation center, lap pool resurfacing, that's complete. Hillcrest and Pioneer Parks have substantial completion this year, so landscaping will be falling into next year. Santa Rita sand volleyball courts are complete. The 32nd Street underpass will be complete. The Animas River Trail rehab from Rank Park to Demon Bridge is complete, except for an added scope of crossing the railroad that we wanted to do this year. We wanted to add that in. But we have to get the PUC approval and the permit from that first. But those projects are done. Santa Rita Park is complete. Demonstration gardens at the Santa Rita Water Reclamation Facility will be constructed next year. We do have them under contract. We got them under contract in August, but that was a little bit late to start with a primarily landscaping project. So we'll be doing that one next year. Transportation projects. The street overlays are complete. The 8th and College Road Diet, we did take that out to bid, but we received no bids. The seal coating or OGFC that we did on Big Line Gulch is complete. The ADA ramps we took to bid, but received no bids. We'll be taking that one back out to bid again. And alley reconstructed paving received no bids. That'll be going out to bid again. And the 50/50 sidewalks, we've received no bids. We're looking at a limited plan of work for 2023 as we are working towards a new, possibly more equitable system for pursuing sidewalk replacements. Water projects, water system telemetry is complete. The water treatment plant reclaim and residuals is scheduled for completion in spring. Well underway. Concrete sidewalks and aprons and a retaining wall is complete. Water dock, the second water dock station, and the fiber are in. The fiber was actually originally supposed to be done next year. We brought it up to this year. Cameras are long lead items, and that'll probably fall till next year, but it's a pretty small piece of it. It's just cameras. So we can call that one complete. West 9th Street water line replacement is complete, and the WIMS, the Water Information Management Systems, is complete. The sewer clean and inspect project is complete. The lift station replacement, which is some pumps at the VFW, this lift station by the VFW there, that's complete. WIMS was the Water Information Management System that worked on water and sewer side, that's complete. And the manhole lining and rehabilitation are complete. This accounts for all the capital improvement projects that came to the CIP division for construction this year. Other CIP or other 2022 budget projects didn't come to our division due to them being with the airport or the library. Airport is separate, library was kind of held out separate because they were going through the discussion about a possible separate district. And they also have some internal staff that were fully capable of handling their projects. Or the projects did not meet the 50,000 and 3-year depreciable asset policy requirements. Or the designs were not complete, and those projects are now scheduled for construction in future years. And then, as we've discussed before, the design is overseen by the individual divisions and departments. We assist them, but if it's not done, we can't take it to construction. So all of these projects that we've listed here is complete on these slides. Some of them aren't completely complete. You know, we're doing the last little bits for this year, but they will be complete at the end of this year. And they are expected to be within the amended budget that we had at the time of contracting. Most of them required us to come back to you for amendments prior to contracting because we got those bids and we're having sticker shock. But after we went to bid, they're all expected to be completed within those budgets. And we have detailed budget report to share with you guys afterwards, so that you can see those inflationary impacts that we were looking at.
Mm-hmm.
So this is my big schedule overseeing for all of the projects. And I don't expect you guys to be able to read this. And I just want you to know that we are still using this. We have an activity in, for each project, we have design, we have procurement, and we have construction, so that we can use this to help coordinate with those other departments and divisions as to when those projects are coming to us. But it's not very presentation friendly. So I thought we could look at a smaller spreadsheet instead. It's kind of a little more focused. It's just those construction items pulled out into a separate spreadsheet. And separated by the discipline that we're using. So these are the Parks and Rec projects
Or 2023.
for 2023, pending budget approval, obviously. This spreadsheet only has anticipated construction activities organized by project manager. Makes it a little easier to see the scope of what we're looking at for next year. The orange highlighting and the project number, that shows projects that were originally scheduled for construction in this year, but did not come to us for construction this year. Green shows projects that are currently under contract, which there aren't any on that one. Oh, there are at the bottom there, the demonstration gardens. The green's kind of hard to see on the screen, isn't it? I apologize for that. And yellow shows that we're working on bid documents. So the yellow start date there for the Chapman Hill Ski Area Construct. That yellow indicates that we're working on bid documents right now.
What are they doing? Oh, okay.
This part is for a new tow.
Utah, the big, small toe.
And also some lighting and some
It's a
landscape.
small toe though, right?
I believe
Yeah,
so,
yeah, I
yes.
think it's a small toe in lighting. Okay.
And Owen would be able to answer those details a little more.
Yeah.
More assuredly than I can. So Owen's looking at 13 projects worth about $10 million for Parks and Rec next year. Plus he'll have some landscaping to finish up at Hillcrest and Pioneer Parks like we mentioned earlier. For the utilities projects. So there's a certain amount of work that you have to do for every project, regardless of the size of it. And then, you know, as they get bigger, that adds, as it gets longer, that adds, but there's a certain amount of startup and shutdown, project closeout of work that you just have to do for everyone. So. Typically, yeah, and so utilities projects typically have a high level of complexity as well, which makes Gary's 16 project workload a lot bigger than a $6.8 million budget makes it appear at first, you know, not that $7 million is anything to sneeze at. But, you know, when you're looking at some of these others that have higher levels, I still think that this person is fully loaded. I don't think that there's any slack at all in there. Then in the transportation discipline, which includes engineering, streets, multimodal, those projects, we have another. This slide shows 19 projects worth 19 projects worth like 21 million, I think it was. And it was made before I was informed that 308 OGFC, the open graded friction course, and that 313 Reconstruct Junction were going to be put on hold so that we could do reconciliation and be able to fully fund 250, 251 if needed. So those two are still on here. I made this slide before I learned that they had been pulled for now.
Actually, a quick question.
Certainly.
It says CIP totals is 37. Is that all the capital improvement projects, or is there areas that are none?
Those are the ones that are anticipated to come to the CIP division. So yes, there are ones that are not in there, such as the airport ones.
Yeah.
Some of these smaller projects, things that are under $50,000, but may still be funded under the CIP policy.
Yeah.
Those don't come to us. So there are others. 47 is what we anticipate coming to us, to the CIP division.
Okay, so trying to grasp what the total amount of capital improvement project is in the budget. The 2022 budget had 2 pages, the one I emailed, and I think you wrote on, and thank you for
Yes.
that. Of about 54 million. That include all, that include the airport and some smaller.
Yes, they're in here too.
What would be the comparable number value in the 2022 budget? Because when that-
40, this spreadsheet does have that number. You might want to flip it over because I have a big yellow. This doesn't have all the projects shown. But because I hid them, they are in the tally. 47 million is that total number.
Okay, so last year 54, 54, this year.
47. You bet. So yeah, if you went through and tallied up all the numbers in that column, you would not get to that 47 million because I hit a lot of the columns that did not relate to 2020, or a lot of the rows that did not relate to 2022.
Yeah, to me, you could interpret it as.
Exactly.
something more.
I just wanted to call out that there's an issue here, so yes, I'm happy to clarify that for you. Okay. So for the I broke this into two because 17 more projects, another 17 or another $19.5 million is not something that one person can take on. So that's why we have requested another project manager to support these projects for our 2023 budget. Okay. So for the future of the CIP staffing, we would like to hire that additional project manager that we've requested. The original staffing plan that we went into this year with had us sharing 2 engineer/project manager types with other divisions. We were going to share the utilities engineer with utilities, and he was going to spend half his time doing CIP projects. And then a senior civil engineer within the engineering department was also going to spend half of his time doing CIP projects. Both of those divisions have decided that they need their people full time. So we are asking for this additional person, but it is not an increase to our budget. It's more of a restructuring from our perspective. From the other, for the utilities and the engineering side, they are taking on another half a person. But they need that in order to press forward with their project designs. That's a big part of why a lot of these projects weren't constructed this year. Well, it is a big part of why they couldn't come to the CIP division. If we had gotten all of those projects, we would not have been able to construct them this year with how long it took to get people on board. We're in a much better position to take on the projects now. And we'll also be looking to fill our other 2 inspectors that are on our current staffing plan. So looking ahead, we're working on training and certification policy to encourage professional growth and a common knowledge base. And this is going to be a policy that's going to be across all of public works. It's going to be one policy for with some different training. Obviously, we have some different areas of expertise that are needed in our different jobs. We're incorporating lessons learned from projects into policy and document revisions, and we want to continue with the transparency and financial and other reporting to City Council. So I also have the other document, the big spreadsheet that we're talking about. If you guys want to ask more questions and focus on this presentation, or you've already asked what you want as we go along, want to move into the spreadsheet, I will leave that to you. Any preferences?
Can I just start first by thanking you? Yeah. Melissa, Kim, and I recall how we didn't have anything like this 3 years ago. Nothing. We had no sense of it. And how some projects would be carried forward for years and years. So just starting with a huge thank you for putting this together in a readable spreadsheet, and then also on the progress that you are making with your team. So I'll start with that, but open it up for questions or comments.
Happy to assist. Thank you. And then, I don't know how to get to my other document. I'm done with this.
Ben, would you know how to do that?
I'll bet Scott.
The big spreadsheet. Yes, let's not worry about it. Let's just, does everybody have a copy of the big spreadsheet?
Yeah.
Although it would be nice if we could share it with the public, but
It would be.
there's another spreadsheet that she doesn't know how to get to.
Yeah, I don't know how to.
Maybe you could help her with that, because you get the documents all the time. I know, I'm putting you under pressure.
It's saved in the council for study sessions for.
This is over here.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Here comes Tom.
There's, you heard your name. You just forgot the slide.
And I will say, like the first part of this spreadsheet was exported directly out of our database. And so I didn't have to do anything with these first 5 columns. The other columns probably took me a day and a half because our systems really aren't built to make this easy to get to. So, and a big part of what I spent time on was trying to figure out what numbers do they want to compare to what numbers and how to break it up in a way that was reasonable. I think I could do it a lot quicker going forward now that I built this format, but.
I think this sheet is the best financial summary that you've made that I've seen on capital improvement projects. I really appreciate it. You have so much information on a high level, because I need to know the detail of a small project list that shouldn't change from council decide, but this gives us a clear idea of how we're doing budget forecasting financially. So I think this is good.
I'm glad, and I'd like to kind of just run through a little bit about how I set this up and what I think it tells us, and then take questions and comments from y'all. So we were asked to provide the 2022 budget information for CIP projects with additional columns showing where which are being completed this year, which are being carried forward as a measure of progress, as well as showing how the completed projects vary from the initial or adopted budget as an indicator of inflation. The first 5 columns, as I said, were exported straight out of our database. And that includes the project name and number, so you have to count that one. And then the double line differentiates when we move into the areas that I added in. The data that was exported out of our database was as of 11/28/22. It includes the actual and encumbrances. So unless we're writing new POs or something, this should give us a really good picture of where we're going to end up. Let's see, the first 3 columns that I added are for projects that are either fully completed in 2022 or contracted and started in 22, well on their way, expected to finish in 2023. And then we have a column comparing the current actual encumbered funds to the initial adopted budget. I would like to point out that CIP division did not do all of these. I don't want any of the other folks in other divisions feeling like I'm trying to claim credit for what they have accomplished. As we said, the airport oversees all of their own projects. And I put that in one comment to the other projects. If it's performed by utility staff, it sends it over in the comments column so that you can see who actually completed them. If you're interested, we are giving credit where credit has been earned. Then the next 3 columns are for the projects that did not get completed this year and are not well underway at this point. They may be well underway in design, but as far as construction and contracting, they are not. The first column is ones that have not come to the CIP division yet, but we do anticipate they will come to us. Let's see. Most likely they're still in design. That's the most common reason. It's not the exclusive reason. The next one is projects that will not come to the CIP division. Either they are acquisition of land, something that doesn't really apply to us, or they are by the airport, things like that. And then the last column is the others, because try as I might, I couldn't come up with just a few columns that would incorporate everything. So we have an other. And the other is the ones that we did not receive bids for, that we took out to bid but did not, or they've gone through such a significant scope change that they are essentially eliminated. And they've been rolled into another project, or they've been completely eliminated. So that's what's in those columns. And then there's my comments. Try to explain a little bit more about the project status and the plan moving forward. So if you're interested in a particular project, hopefully that'll help give you a little more information as to where it is and how it's moving forward. The last column is the 2023 budget for CIPs, but it's only the ones that have funds in 2022. So you can see how the 22 projects are rolling forward. Either they are rolling and we're carrying the same money forward because we didn't complete, or we are carrying more money because we completed design and we're moving into construction, that sort of stuff. So they are there, but not all of 2023 is listed there, because if it didn't have money in 2022, it was not relevant for this report. Anything that I missed here?
Question.
Yes.
So the 2023 budget is not here, or is it?
The 2023 budget is in here, but I hid all of the projects that did not have any funds in 2022. So the rows are hidden. That's why the tally is accurate.
Yeah, so the budget, if I add up, that's one of the reasons why I like this format. In the current budget, the 2023 budget, we don't have this sheet. Yeah?
Oh, okay.
It's broken up per post, streets. So if I would add all those numbers up, would I end up at 47 million? Or is it, what is in the budget, the 2023 budget? What would be the total?
I believe I know the answer, but I've already said it once. We will get the expert.
Well, I mean, this is where I am.
Actually,
And you probably
these columns and this column were all exported to
From
me
the-
and given
from
to me.
OpenGov. Yeah,
So I believe that all of them are in that tally.
Councilor Boston has a question about the 2023 capital project.
Yes, sir.
Well, I have to request as well. The request is this, the request I made for this sheet to be updated from the budget book towards where we are now. for 2022. And I think this is a very valuable format to keep track of one approach. But the 2022 budget does not have this summary of all budgets. As I'm aware of, it's broken down in different sections of the report, but it's really in that section. So is it possible to get either this budget moving forward or after? I would like to have that sheet. This exact sheet because next year. Well, pretty much, because next year. I'll ask you the same question. It's like, where are we?
Okay, yeah,
And then
we can do
the
that.
other question is the combined budgets for 2023 that's shown as 47 million. Is that the budget for all capital improvement budgets that we have in the 2023 budget?
So the total capital amount is 55,118,000. So I don't have the number exactly in front of me. Those capital funds do have interfund transfer out, and they also have projects in there that wouldn't necessarily come with the CIP division.
land acquisition, things like that.
Sure.
Some of those are in here though, because like all the airport projects. Oop, that's one side. So what I started with was what you sent me, which is this and that. And then I added in these columns. And then I hid the rows for 2023 if it didn't relate to 2022, because this is a 2022 kind of report. Sure.
Could I suggest that in the interest of time, that we're not going to necessarily solve this right now, but that you get back to us and
Yeah,
with your,
absolutely.
what
I
you
can
can do?
send that.
I think that would be great.
We can work together
Perfect.
to create this exact format for.
So other questions or comments for Julie?
I just want to say.
Did I get that? No, Jennifer, I'm sorry. That
This is
completely came out.
very exciting to be able to see it, this snapshot.
Mhm.
And I also think it's very exciting to see the projects that you've completed. And
Mm-hmm.
I also recognize that some that are not completed you're not under your control, and we don't receive a bid.
Yeah.
And we're changing the way we do the bid process, starting it earlier. and,
Yes.
With the interest of getting bids so that we can actually get things constructed, and that it appears.
I'm sorry, to
That's
interrupt. Allison.
She's fine right now.
Okay.
Well, if we.
It also appears to me that the CIP department is getting the things done that they've been tasked with. And if it's had to be continued, it isn't because of lack of ability or capability. So and now that you have staffing, which you didn't have before, I see 2023 as long as the economy treats us well and the bidders bid and the constructors construct, we should be in fine shape for that.
I think we're in a much better place, yes, now. So then, just a little bit more, if I may, just another minute or two. The greens are conditional formatting, and that says that I've been checking the math, making sure that it all circled back and matched up. And at the bottom, we had the 54 million, we completed 43 projects. We have 17 more projects that are nearing completion. 15 projects did not come to the CIP division yet. 5 were not CIP division work and 7 were in that other category. So in addition to the dollar values at the bottom, we have the number of projects completed at the bottom. So that you can see what has been done, what hasn't been done, and hopefully see a little bit more about why that's happening. We've been working with the various departments and divisions to help them spread out their timelines, to get more time for design and to get into a sustainable cycle so that we can do our bidding earlier, get more contractor approved interest, and also complete the projects within the construction season rather than just designing during the construction season. Spread out that timeline, give it more time. And that's our first year in CIP. I think we accomplished a lot. We're just getting started. Next year, we're looking to dial it in and scale it up.
Right? Any other comments?
Thank you. I'm excited to see what you do fully staffed. You know, the progress on all the numbers. Congratulations. Thank you for all your hard work.
Very good.
I have to make an observation, this sheet, and it's more to its council as well. So if I look at the sheet, because the reason for the sheet is get an update. And when I look at the sheet, we have 54 million projects and completed 24. And there's valid reasons for it. Cost, no bids, interest rates. But it shows that there's a disconnect between the budget and the actual completion. If I take out the airports, which that is a significant portion of all the capital projects.
Yes, it is.
I'm looking at a fifth of the dollar volume that is complete in this budget. And first of all, I'm trying to ask you, and you're just one part of it because we don't get to know to you.
Right.
How do you do that? But also to council, if we complete excluding the airport, 1/5 of the projects and for 2023, this is one of the reasons why I have multiple reasons why I don't do capital 2023 budget. The capital improvement projects, if we put in 55 million or 47 and take out the airport portion, which is 10 million, 11 million, shouldn't use 47, that leaves 36 million capital improvement projects in the airport. Last year we had 31 and we did 150. What makes us so confident that we even come close? Yeah, and because we budget for it, but we're not confident of achieving it. So that is for one part of the exam. How do we do it? How do we improve it? How do we get more realistic numbers in the budget? And for council, to me, this is extremely unlikely to take place. If you had the year before after the project list and actual completion list, we would probably find a similar dollar value that was not completed, not shown because I think the airport being distorted.
I'm also keeping my eye on the time. Can you remind us of the staffing, how it changed? We had less than you were talking about a fifth, Councillor Bosman's, but we had a staffing of 1, I believe.
Right.
And we've gone to a staffing of how many? 6.
And
So
we're
there's a
also-
huge difference there. So I
But
think you,
that's just the construction part of it. And
right,
a big part of why we did not have more done, well, more did not come to CIP, why the 16.8 million was not turned over to CIP, the vast majority of that was because of the designs were not complete.
right.
So what we are doing on the staff side of that is as I've been working with the other divisions and departments to get them to stretch out their scheduled timelines, to not expect to design and construct in the same year on larger projects. So that's what I'm working on, is trying to get them to stretch it out, to be a little more conservative in what they expect to accomplish each year. Get the design done one year, get it bid over the fall and the winter, and then construct it the next year. So I'm working with them on that. And also, I know that the utilities engineer was spending half the time on CIP work, now is all engineering. The new senior civil engineer going into engineering was going to spend half their time on CIP. Now they're going to be doing just engineering. Allison's also been working for a similar role to the engineer in streets to help with those projects, looking at the design side and making sure that that part's moving forward. So we are working, we understand that is, I mean, this brings it out. I'm the one that put this together. I pulled it together to show you that that's where we're getting hung up, and we are doing things. to
If I can make a comment, over half of that $54 million was either not turned over to the CIP division, was not CIP division work, or there were no bids. Over half of that $54,000.
54 million.
$54 million. So I want to make it clear that it has nothing to do with the CIP division. I believe you are. So additionally, I'd like to point out that 43 projects were completed and 17 have been continued into 2023, whereas 27 projects were not even part of the CIP's division. So you can't use the total number of projects when you're discussing, is the CIP doing their job? And you can't use the total number of millions of dollars when you're talking about, is CIP doing their job? because they weren't even in the CIP division yet.
As
So
one
you
counselor,
need- so
I'm
you-
supportive of 2023
I'm
in the
gonna-
budget, so thank you, and so I think
I'm
Melissa
gonna-
is too, and. we
I'm
can
going
wrap
to end with those points made, and I'm going to thank you for this and for taking the extra time to prepare something that, you know, we have asked for. I know we make a lot of requests, and so I know we also need to be cognizant of every request, how much time that does take from the staffing.
Thank you.
City manager, was there something that you wanted to add?
I'm gonna, if you wouldn't mind, I think we're good. I just want to apologize to Allison. We forgot to place her into the participant. I think she may have had some comments to add to this, and so that's who she was texting, but I will have her see if we can put an email on it. I just think with the flow of where we were going, it was
Sure.
kind of hard to stop it and bring in, but we'll get any comments that she had.
Perfect.
Thanks for your work too, Allison.
Yep, and we will
Yes.
reconvene at 5:30 for the city council meeting. Please be on time.
Yes.
You bet.